good morning, afternoon, or evening, and welcome to the Bloody Disgusting Network. The following show is just horrifying. Beware.
My friendship to all of you precludes my involvement with any one of you. But if you wanna make love, then I do too, and I'll be right there behind you. All in the name of oh, all in the name of oh, all in the name of oh.
Greetings, constant listeners, and welcome to another episode of the Losers Club. I am your host, Jenn Gunky Adams, and we are taking a little bit of a detour, or a jaunt, if you will, to Booyah Moon today. And I always want to say booyah, and that's the only time I'm going to do it for the whole episode, I promise. We are discussing, I know, we'll see. But we're discussing the 2006 novel Lisey's Story. The Apple TV Plus adaptation is currently airing, so we thought we would jump ahead and cover the novel as well. So the cool thing about Booyah Moon is you don't have to go there alone, or you might find people there. And I have some wonderful losers joining me on this literary bool hunt. And we also want to know what edition of the book you read and what was your first experience with Lisey's Story. So who do we have sitting on the edge of the pool from Chicago?
Hey, this is Michael Bull Blood Roffman. It's funny because I could have kept Monroeville Mall because it's in Pittsburgh, or it's outside Pittsburgh, and I guess it would have fit the story. But so I read the paperback Pickett books or pocket books. Pickett books. Pocket. Yeah. Okay.
I was like the off-brand.
Yeah. Right. No. I actually found this paperback. Fortunately, because it was so hard to find a paperback copy of this book before the Apple TV series edition came out. It's like almost as if all the publishers sent out the low men and picked up all the paperbacks off of every shelf across America. And so I looked in our archive of paperbacks that we've had ever since the office closed here in Chicago, and found one. And it was like after I'm not even joking, like weeks of looking for one in the bookstores, and you couldn't even order it on Amazon because they were like really, really expensive. So I just didn't want to use my hardback. So all of this to say, I have one. It's I believe it's from that era when it first was the first paperback. So I marked it up. Great. Good job, Mike. And this is my first time reading it. So lots of thoughts.
Nice, which we will get into.
Yeah.
And I think I see someone else on the steps all the way down in Austin, Texas.
Hi, I'm Anna McCool Cox.
Oh, nice.
And and I sometimes reference there's a lot of times that I was reading Stephen King late at night during my drinking days. So no specific memory of reading this book since 2006 would have been right there. But I did remember enough of it that I knew I was getting into. And I kind of actually wound up liking it more than I remember liking it. And this is actually I don't know about not finding paperbacks, Mike. I found this was pretty easy to get, but
which one do you have? Is it?
It is one of the most modern reprints.
Okay.
That was the Netflix, not Netflix, the show tie-in.
No, there's no show tie-in.
Oh, interesting.
It's a Scribner, 2016.
Well, that is lucky then. I called all these bookstores. They're like, we're getting it in late May or something like that.
I got it from bookshop.org.
Oh, nice.
Nice. Yeah. I've never tried them. And last but not least, our final friend is joining us from not across the pond, but across the pool, maybe. Who is joining us from the UK?
Hiya, it's Johann Empty Devils Trotter.
Ooh, nice.
A deep cut there for one of Scott's novels. So basically, I was reading the hardback first edition, because generally I'm quite good with taking care of my books. I don't mind reading the fancy first editions. So yeah, my first experience for this one, I first read it back in 2016, according to Goodreads. And then I read it again in 2018, and this is my third reread now for the TV show. And it's one of my favorite King books, which is why I've visited it like 3 times in the last 5 years. So I'm excited to talk about it with everyone.
Oh, wow. Well, and I think I have the same edition, although I took my book jacket off. Mine is the Scribner, I think, first edition, and I got it at a used store a while ago. And this was my second read of this, and the first time I was reading it on my chronological reread, probably about 5 years ago, and I don't want to say I hated it the first time, but there's when we get to a part that we'll talk about today involving a can opener, I was so angry, and I was already annoyed with the language, like the gunkies, and so I just checked out, and I really didn't remember like what had even happened at the end, because I was just kind of reading and listening, and just kind of my mind was wandering, but I had checked it off my list, so I was really not like expecting to like it, and I was shocked at how much I loved it this time. Like I still do have some problems and some questions, but like I feel like the place I am in my life right now, I was much more willing to go where this book really wanted me to go, and I really connected with it a lot more this time, and I really, really enjoyed it. So, sometimes if you don't like a book, try it again, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or not, sometimes your first read is, justified. Anyways, all that. So now that we are all on the path, let's head past the Ark of Pooh, past the hollyhocks, past the cemetery, and head to the Derry Public Library to discuss the history of this novel in a section we call the Derry Public Library.
Now, Mike Hanlon, if you see...
Excuse me, sir. Do you have Prince Albert in a can? You do? Well, you better let the poor guy out.
Yeah, Mike Hanlon, that I had to go, that I had to get cleaned up. Tell him I'll see him tonight.
Get out! Last chance, don't you? Get out! Get out! Excuse me now.
So Mike, as our resident Mike Hanlon, if you will, I know you did a lot of digging into the genesis of this story.
I did. I think one of the most important things that I love to bring to this podcast is just the history of where King is at the time of publishing, or the point of where he's at in his own career. And what's interesting for us here is, obviously we're jaunting ahead. We're just going to keep using jaunt this whole episode, just keep going. They use it in the book, so why not?
Yeah.
But we're obviously skipping ahead, because we just literally wrapped up. We're still in the late 90s here in the Losers Club, but we're leaping ahead to 2006. So we got to ask ourselves, like, where is he now? So this book published October 24th, 2006, and it was actually the second of 2 books that year. Cell had dropped earlier that January. It won the 2006 Bram Stoker Award for Best Novel. It was nominated for the World Fantasy Award in 2007. It was actually, the origins traced back a few years before that in an excerpt called Lisey and the Madman. And that was published in McSweeney's Enchanted Chamber of Astonishing Stories, which is, I love that. It sounds like Lemony Snicket's or something like that. Uh-huh. And then that was nominated for a Bram Stoker Award for Best Long Fiction in 2004. So clearly, the lines are drawn, and they knew that this is going to go on to bigger and brighter places. But so anyway, here's where he's at by the time he's working on Lisey's story. So, 2006, he's still coming off a pretty audacious run following his 1999 near-death experience. And so in 2000, this is wild. So in 2000, because he's basically saying, like, after the accident, I'm incapable of writing. It's like, I've never done this in my life again. So I'm starting over from square one. And King is obviously, it's a harrowing experience, but he bounces back, and he bounces back in the most Kingian way. So in 2000, this is his run that he does. So in 2000, he finishes on writing, which gives him actually some more inspiration to keep, obviously, all right, I'm back in the groove of things. 2001, he gives us both Dreamcatcher and his sequel to The Talisman with Peter Straub of Black House. Then he finishes the entire Dark Tower saga in this like wild tear that has like Wolves of Kala, Song of Susanna, the titular 7th novel, all within from 2003 to 2004. And in between all that, he's done like From a Buick Gate, The Colorado Kid. And then, as I mentioned, Cell. He's also got Everything's Eventual. He finishes Rose Red, finally, that project that he wanted to do with Steven Spielberg, which ultimately led into an actual series. And so then he also does his unfinished, online novel, The Plant. So he's in a groove, I'd say. He's back. The king is back. But you could tell from these projects that mortality is on the mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like the fact that he even like finishes The Dark Tower is pretty emblematic of the notion that like King is obviously like, all right, well, I almost left this earth and I left a lot of unfinished business. So I'm going to knock this out. I'm going to get things done. I'm going to clean house, basically, which actually is a good seg, because what happened was, in addition to the car accident in 2000, he also suffered a really severe bout of pneumonia. And during that time, I'm getting to the clean house metaphor in a second, but during that time, Tabitha, his wife, was actually kind of reconfiguring his whole study, putting things away, cleaning it up, so that when he returned home, kind of be in order and all. What he realized, though, was basically had even more of a scare of mortality. Here's a quote that he actually has from it. This is in King in his own words. He said, "I had pneumonia around the year 2000 and came very close to stepping out. When I came home from the hospital, my wife had cleaned out my study, and I thought to myself, I've died. I'm a ghost." And the idea for Lisey's story came from that. Particularly the idea that writers, when they make things up, they go to a different world. Obviously you can connect this to the fact that there is a mortality issue, right? Like the fact, and he admits that too in Book Page at the time of this release. He said, sure, there's no doubt about that. I had the accident, then I had the pneumonia, and I realized that I was closer to death than I ever even thought. So he admits to these mortality issues. Now, what I think here that he's doing, even also with Lisey's story, is checking off another box. And I think it's the idea that he's paying homage to his wife. And I think that's something that he had probably been wanting to do forever. And the fact that he dedicates this book to Tabby, and he talks about that too in the same interview. He says, spouses of creative people never get credit, and a lot of time they get blame. And, there's that story about Robert Louis Stevenson's wife urging him to throw the first draft of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde into the fire, which he did. And then he wrote the thing again. And what nobody ever suggests is that maybe she was right, and that the second go around was actually better than the first. And as we all know, as constant listeners and constant readers, it was Tabby that urged King to be like, oh, wow, you have something here with Carrie. Keep it going. Otherwise, maybe in another world than this, he's still in the back of a trailer, chopping out books and, keeping them to himself. Anyway, I surmise, as I tend to do in this section, that he's hitting two birds with one stone here. He's dealing and wrestling with his own mortality issues, while also at the same time finally paying homage, wanting to really pay homage to his wife. And you obviously get those sentiments in a lot of the quotes that you have, that he even does to this day. He's on the campaign, for the Apple TV story, and his narrative hasn't really changed on this book. He's still leaning on those two narratives. But what you really get the sense of is that this is really, he says it's his favorite. When it first came out, he said it was his favorite book. Now he's gone back in one of the interviews that's in the reprint that's tied to the Netflix, or not Netflix, the Apple TV story or the series. He basically says it's one of his favorites. He doesn't want to, disappoint his children, but he still hasn't changed the fact that he says this comes from a personal place, personal. And I think that comes through in this book. But anyway.
Yeah,
that's basically my head is at when looking at all the material that we've had over 15 years now. It's been 15 years since this book published. So
oh, wow.
A lot of context to kind of soak up with. And I'm sure we're going to be leaning into that context as we're going ahead into this book, because it's so personal. But
yeah, my pet theory kind of is that his Eclipse trilogy, which is what I say, I might be the only person that actually thinks of it as that, because it's actually maybe 4-ish books where he writes about women who are abused by their husbands. I think that was a way of kind of processing what his addiction was like for Tabitha. And I look at this one and I think this is kind of his way of processing what his marriage has been like for Tabitha, kind of like a grander like on a grander scale, like, because it hasn't, I'm sure it's not been easy. It's just as it sounds like it was not easy for Lisey, although it is easy in a lot of ways. Like, they do have a lot of privilege that comes from having fame and money. But I mean, there are things that we don't think about. And I think, you know, I like seeing him kind of working these things out. It does feel a bit like man writes about woman, you know, like man writes about what woman thinks of man, you know, which I think, I don't think is always bad, because I think that's interesting. And I like to kind of try to get into his head, but
she literally has no interior life though, except like,
Scott or her sisters. That's really all she has.
I also wanted to add to the background, and he doesn't talk about this a ton, but he relapsed on painkillers after that accident. And I think that must have informed the writing, because in the few interviews he's done where he mentions that relapse, he talks about the dreams and hallucinations he had while he was on these heavy duty painkillers. And also I just remembered this period also because I guess it was incredibly productive for him. But also because Dreamcatcher, also what he wrote while he was in that relapse. So there is some ways that it informs this. And I also think that idea of escape would be something that someone who is in the grip of a relapse would really like be attracted to.
I mean, the idea that he's escaping that of the world, like he attributes so much to it as like the process of writing, but the fact that it is this like real metaphysical world that he's pretty, you know, forward about. You know, there are some interviews where he says like, oh, you know, it could be metaphorical, but for the most part he says like, no, it's a real place that they go to. I think that does speak to that truth. Although now I'm like imagining like, you know, Tabby coming back from to the hospital and he's just like vanished and then the sink is on or something like that.
Well, that's what happens when you're using though. You do vanish. I mean, that's like, as someone who's been in relationships with using people, they go away. Like it's, they're not there anymore. So I don't know how much of that's intentional, how much of it isn't, but he's clearly, like you said, he's clearly working out more here than in his usual. He's always working shit out. And those are the novels that I love, even though I think some of them tend to be not as critically acclaimed. Like, you know, everyone here knows how much I love Desperation. And I think it's the novels where he's really trying to puzzle through something that I get the most attracted to.
I agree.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, because like I think what's so fun about those books is that, and because he basically he's full transparent about like the fact that, you know, he doesn't go in with like a beginning, middle, and end.
Sometimes that's kind of obvious.
I agree. Definitely. So you get the sense that he is like tinkering, but in a world that seems far more personal than I would say even the majority of his novels. Sometimes like there comes the, you know, it's so explicit in saying like, you know, Tabby is not Lisey, I'm not Scott, but then you say like, well, the foundation is certainly there.
Right. You know? Yeah, the example he gives, because I found a quote about that says, in an interview with Bookpage, King cautions that Lisey's story should not be read as autobiographical. For instance, the Kings have 3 children and the Landons are childless.
I love that. Yeah, okay.
Hey, look, I like kids.
Exactly. Our dog is brown and the Landon's dog is, you know. But yeah, it permeates, and he's such like, he writes what he knows, you know. Now, I mean, I will say we know that his father left when he was very young, so he's not writing. I mean, I think we could pretty safely say he's not writing about any kind of coded personal experience. But I think this is such like an allegorical story, you know, which are the ones that I tend to really like, because then I can kind of just project all of my my shit onto it. And that's part of why I don't think I liked it the first time, because I was just not really looking for that. You know, I wasn't really in a place to do that. But I found a quote. Tabitha apparently does not like this book very much.
I could kind of see that, honestly.
I could too. Yeah. So in another interview, and I think it was from Bookpage again, I don't think she's really crazy about this book, to tell you the truth. He says, I think that she respects it and everything, but she's real quiet about this book. She says to me sometimes, are you ever going to write about anything besides writers? I know.
Go Tabby.
I mean,
go Tabby. Yeah.
I love the two of them. I do think, and more of the quote, I do think sometimes she feels like I've gotten caught in a little bit of a warp there, and she may feel that it's a little close to the bone, which I can see. And like, Mike, something you and I were kind of texting about, like, I imagine this book probably represents an extremely stressful and painful time in her life right now. And or not right now, but like, while it's nice to get like that acclaim, or like, yes, Tabitha was really the one that saved me, it's still really hard to go back to that time period, you know? So I imagine reading this, it was just hard to read, you know?
Yeah.
Also, like, there's also like, go ahead.
I was gonna say, do you want me to talk more about living with someone who's in addiction? Because like,
yeah,
like even that I really reacted to the scene or the section where she talks about hunting for his empties.
Yeah.
As someone who's hunted for empties. You know?
I've done that. Mm-hmm.
And that it's horrible. I mean, and to also know that the person you love is in there somewhere. That's not the right metaphor, but that person is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that there's these clues. Actually, I could get really into this because there's these clues that you follow, you know, that is this person using? Are they lying to me? Are they really present? And also the part about Germany was also like, that's sort of the flip side. There is another experience of living with an addict alcoholic where they get that way. And it's still
like
not the same person. It's still not the same person.
Yeah.
You know? And she intuits that, right? Like, and he winds up confirming it. So I think that for Tabitha, if he's writing about looking for bottles, that's not a good time to bring back for Tabby.
Yeah.
That's not something that Tabby wants to remember.
Yeah. And the fact that he would pick up on that, because I remember when I was there, I like would always kind of try to hide that, you know? So the fact that it is present in his mind as the person who would be creating the stash of bottles, you know, tells me it's probably very, very much on her mind.
Yeah.
You know what it kind of reminds me of? This is a real weird stretch of a comp, but has everyone ever seen Reality Bites?
Yes, I love that movie.
Right. I'm a Gen Xer. Excuse me.
Okay, great. Because I always feel like I'm on the cusp of like I'm like Wilson in Home Improvement looking into like Generation X, because like that's when I most align with. But I think of this as like King publishing this in the same way that like Ben Stiller taking Winona Ryder's tapes and like basically being like, hey, look, I got you this thing on MTV, and like, you know, it's like, you know, all the stuff that we went through, you know, that you went through, and like we're gonna finally like iconize it, and like, you know, we're gonna put it out there for people to see, and you know, and we're gonna like do it justice by like, you know, really showing like the emotions and capitalize on that in the sense. I feel like almost that could be that sort of, you know, the way that Winona feels about it in that movie could almost feel the way that like maybe Tabitha does about the fact that like there is a lot of this personal on the page, and maybe that's her way of saying like, you know, you do write a lot of writers like in a way saying like, well, you also write a lot about yourself on here. Maybe there's some things that are just for us as opposed to like out there.
And also,
you know?
he's appropriating, and this is something like a global criticism I have of this novel, is it's not Lisey's story.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh yeah. No.
I agree.
She never gets her own story. She literally never gets her own story. Like, she's involved in his story, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that if I were Tabitha, would also be something that would offend me, because my story of your relapse is different than yours. Like, I was TMI, I was listening to somebody explain to me why they relapsed the other day, and like, it's a different version of history. You know, it's not my story at all. So I think that would be something that I mean, she's probably pretty good at keeping her mouth shut about some stuff too, right? Like, and then I think that's not necessarily a bad thing in a marriage, right?
Right. Yeah.
But this being his most personal book about his marriage and explicitly making that, I do think that it's like that Ben Stiller thing. He totally appropriated her pain, you know, and told his version of that story. Yeah. Which again is so centered on him. Like,
yeah, and that's one of the main issues also I have, even when you think about it thematically, with like the relationship to memory in the past in here. And I've been thinking a lot about it lately, just because of, I mean, obviously we've coming off a year where we have nothing but thoughts in our head. Not a fun time for me, but I guess I don't really like that, which is why I always have like constant culture around me. But I think of the idea of like what this, you know, the story stresses that like the past is always present, right? It's always there. It's always moving. It's always changing. But what I think that this story kind of only hints at is the fact that like there's really no such thing as the past. Like, the past is so subjective, and there's really no way to ever find like an objectivity with the past. And like the concept of like the past always evolving and always being there is flawed, because the past is consistently changing left and right. no matter how many times you reflect back on it. Like if you look back at something that happened in 1995 today and then look back on that memory 2 days from now, like there are probably going to be little things that change, even from that small gap of time. And I think that's something that's a lot of people forget about sometimes when they're thinking about, well, these things happen with two people. And if we're talking about it and reminiscing about it, like it almost becomes like Rashomon, where like it doesn't matter how many times, every time you talk about it, that sliver of the past is going to change. And maybe that's what he's trying to say out with like the idea that the past is always, there. It's always, present.
In the past is always present. I actually just give me that the long boy is the past.
Yeah. It's like gathering
it
dust.
contains everything, and it contains everything, and it's always the present too, right? And it's shifting. It's getting. You could probably take that a long way, actually.
Yeah.
Also, the representation of the long boy in the miniseries is.
Oh, I was kind of into it. I wasn't sure.
Shouldn't show the monster. Like really. Yeah.
I have like no visual, like I don't read visually. And so I was like, oh, that's what. Also, I have no idea what a piebald side is.
I didn't either.
What does that mean?
I know what piebald is. Do you want to know?
What is it? Yeah, what is it?
I thought it was interesting he used it in the way he did, but piebald is like a spotted cow or spotted dog, like a blue heeler dog. Like that's piebald, that spottiness. So he's not using that in terms of fur though. He's using that in terms of like that's weird spottiness, that amorphous like changing pattern.
Ooh. Do you want to know what I thought it was?
Sure.
I thought it was when you bake a pie and the bottom of the crust kind of looks weird. I was like, is it a pie?
I got the image of like that fish creature that came out like a few years ago that looked like one of the cartoon characters or something like that. It looks like almost like Kirby, where it's like just a fate that's bald face almost. Look, I don't know. That's what I saw. And then didn't work. But
in the chat.
Yeah.
Oh, the piebald. Maybe we can post a picture of what piebald actually is.
This is my Texas being useful.
Nice. Well, and I had a hard time finding reviews of this, of the actual book, probably because like reviews of the show are kind of flooding all of my searches right now. But I found one from, let's see, that I actually kind of agree with, because like what we're talking about, I agree with all of what we're saying, and I think we're going to get into it. But this is by Janet Maslin, I believe, from the New Yorker or the New York Times. I guess I should probably check that. New York Times, yes. So she says, here is a tender, intimate book that makes an epic interior journey without covering much physical terrain. It can move great distances while traveling no further than from a house home to lonely Lisa Landon, the widow of a writer a la King, to its neighboring barn, the late writer's mostly benign one-boy clubhouse. The scope sounds modest, yet this book is haunting even by Mr. King's standards. And then something we have to talk about, she talks about the language used, which kind of relates to the piebald thing. She says, his use of language in Lisey's story is so larded with baby talk that it borders on the pathological, which I agree with. And like, I don't know what a piebald thing is. So like when I miss that, like that's a fundamental thing. And I think one of the things I've loved about the miniseries is like he's cut a lot of that, and like because that took me out. It took me a long time to figure out what the hell he was talking about, And I wonder if he got so into the interior language that he forgot that like his readers aren't in that interior,
Yeah.
There is Google.
Yeah, there is.
That's true. That's true.
I'm sorry, Jen, but like, if you really wanted to know what piebald was,
well, I just thought it was like, a pie thing.
It's there on your phone. It's right there on your phone.
That's true.
Yeah, I would say though, the one of the issues that I have with a lot of the fantastical,
he should not have assumed that people knew. I do agree that it's an obscure enough term. Yeah, that it would have he could have like used some kind of like context cues to like. And actually he almost does. He talks about when it looks like skin cancer.
Oh, okay. Maybe I missed that.
That
part.
actually would be that's what he means by piebald. Piebald, I guess, technically is also about discoloration of pigment.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what it looks like.
So I've been watching it concurrently with the series, or reading it concurrently with the series, and I thought that helped just because one of the things that I had, and this is certainly emblematic of his last 3 books in the Dark Tower, and parts of the Wastelands, I think, is where I'll just read stretches sometimes and I'll be like, okay, and there's a lot here, and I don't know exactly what you're trying to grasp visually sometimes. And I feel like sometimes with Booyah Moon it gets that way, but so that's where I can kind of see where it's like the piebald thing, where you're just like, okay, so you're kind of it's almost like you're putting a puzzle in your head of like what he's trying to say, which is what I imagine like adapting the series that it makes sense that he would have to be involved because if they're like, all right, so you got this long boy, Stephen, can you sketch it out for us? do you think maybe you could sketch out like maybe just like what the Booyah Moon looks like? Because I mean I'll say in like the Dark Tower there are parts where he gets to like fantastical lands, especially in books 6 and 7, where I'm like, I was just rereading so much where I'm just like, okay, I think I got it. Got it.
Same.
You know?
I will say the pool looked exactly like how I envisioned it.
100%. Yeah.
I thought that was like, yep, that's what I saw. You know?
Yeah. Chilling.
I think so, but my vision of the long boy was a more like worm like
same
thing. So that's why the series I was like, I guess I do kind of love about King that he often uses adaptations to like edit.
Yes. I definitely think he did that here.
To like fix things that he thinks maybe didn't work the first time. So I can see like why he might have changed it also. But I do disagree with the decision to show it so soon. Because I think one of the things that works in the book is that it's just, you see the side. You just see this stretch, what I envisioned as a stretch of really gross skin. Right? And that is pretty terrifying actually. Like to only see that and to know that it goes on either side as far as the eye can see. It's pretty, it's
way more scary, I think.
Yeah.
Definitely. But I think that's why I find each reread to be more beneficial, because from the start you know what everything is, instead of being like, what is a blood bowl? Is it a clue? Is it a, I don't know, whatever, but like a gift, I suppose. But like, that's why I think rereads are really good for this book. And I think that's why as well, people might be struggling with the TV show, the first few episodes, because it is very, you have to be patient with it, I think, which is what I like about King books, because he does use so much language that he's created. But I guess it is just frustrating for people who don't know yet what it is.
Yeah. So. It felt a bit like reading Clockwork Orange, how there's like
keep reading it to get it.
Yeah. And then eventually you do. And my first reread, like that really took me out. But this time I actually kind of liked it. I was also listening to Mare Winningham read it because she reads the audiobook. And while like the piebald thing, like the way she says that is like, those are fun words, like I enjoyed hearing her say those over and over again. I also like when I read, especially King stuff, I think what I connect to is like the emotion of the story and the characters rather than like the visual. That's, what's going on. I constantly forget where I am in Midworld when I'm reading Dark Tower. And this book has so much emotion to connect to. But I mean, it weaves so much through time, which I really like. And I think the show is doing a really good job of representing that. But I mean, it could be easy to get lost, I could see.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that has to do with just the structure and format of how he puts this together,
Well, speaking of structure and format, should we mosey on down to the structure and format office and for our section?
Put my hat on.
What does he call? What's his office called?
The study, his study.
Yeah, maybe that's you could use that term for the.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah.
Section. Yeah.
For a section we like to call structure and format. A study of it, if you will.
Yeah.
Look at me. Look at me, teacher.
I actually found a quote about what his original idea for this was, which I thought was crazy compared to what it actually turns out to be. He said, I first thought it was going to be a funny book about a guy who is going to be a big shot writer. I wanted to show that his wife got completely ignored, but was the person responsible for all of his success. I wanted to have 5 or 6 things in the background where she had actually pulled all of his chestnuts out of the fire. So basically like a exceedingly wacky version of him taking Carrie and getting it published. It's not what we got. I think he kind of maybe started writing that and then found a lot more emotion and tenderness and gratitude probably as he started writing it. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. I mean, he does a lot of this type of writing in a lot of his current books, but what I really like here is the Russian doll style storytelling he's doing. I mean, like, I've kind of harped on him a little bit for doing like lateral passing in terms of memories. It's certainly something that they do in the Stand reboot, whatever, where they like, go back to someone's memory and then they on a past event, and then within that past memory pivot over to someone else that is also having a past. And you're like, wait a second, you kind of have to follow the breadcrumbs here. I think he does a pretty good job in being able to show, where the breadcrumbs are going, just because we are also in like third person omniscient. But I think what's interesting, and you see a lot of it, especially when when Scott's having to talk about Paul and his father, the way that we start from the present and then go to a pivotal event between, Lisey and Scott. And then we allow Scott to be the storyteller in that sense that also goes back into the past from there. And sometimes, this is crazy, then we even go from the past in that past. So like you're literally going from it's like Russian doll. Like that's the only thing I can think of is just like you just keep going and keep going and keep going. And I think like first, thank God, I'm sure everyone involved in the Apple show is just like, thank God he's doing this, because otherwise it's going to be like the fucking Wire and they're going to have to just like put note tabs everywhere. Yeah, right. And so, but I think as a reader, it can often be confusing. But I think once you get on the right path, it's really fun. I found myself like, just kind of getting in a weird mathematical mind reading this book. And I guess I could see that as being infuriating to other people though. So I digress.
Yeah. And I love how he actually has like a single sentence transitioning from one time period to the next, which reminded me of It in so many ways, the way he would go from the past to the present. And it kind of makes like a seamless transition. And then you kind of know where you are quite quickly, I think. So I like the way he kind of made one run into the other.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, it is kind of a Boole hunt of a novel. It's like one thing leads to the next thing, leads to the next thing. And if you think about it, because I've been kind of turning over in my head, what is Lisey's story and what does Lisey's story mean? And I think, and I've got more thoughts about it when we get kind of to the hook and to her character, but like the writing at the very end is really the only time I think we see Scott actually write, because you could read everything of Scott is from Lisey's perspective and from Lisey's memories of him, which is a little like narratively problematic because she wasn't there. So how is she going to remember all of the nuance of these flashbacks? I tend to just kind of let that stuff go. But yeah, it's just interesting to see, like, he is now, as the novel is written, he is who she remembers him as until we get to the very end. And then the story is her getting the whole truth. And it's almost kind of written as it's a gift to her to get this entire truth, or to get that close to him, which, is kind of unlocks a whole lot of other things for me about relationships. But yeah.
I was surprised at how little I got lost. Like, I think I was more annoyed that I had to kind of think about it so much. Okay, where am I? All right. Okay. Here I am. I'm not sure. We shouldn't digress to the TV show. I don't think the TV show handles it that well, but,
really?
But it is, to a certain extent also a book about the memory of trauma. Right. Yep. And I've been doing some reading about how common it is. There's no such thing as a recovered memory, but it is true that people who go through extreme trauma do tend to not remember. Like, the detail is protective. Yeah. Right. And that talk therapy works in terms of getting to it. Also, Mary Carr writes about this in her book about writing memoirs, about how really tough memories are usually pretty deep, and that you only get to them if you're trying to get to them, like through writing or talking.
Yeah, so that was something that was really, I was thinking a lot about when I was reading, because that, I would argue, that is getting the bad gunky out, is writing and talking. And that is the healthy way to do it. And I think ultimately maybe that is what he gives Lisey at the end, as he does this. I don't know. It still kind of centers him, and I'm still kind of piecing together how I feel about that. But
yeah, I think that is, he's doing, it's what he's doing to stay sane, right? Like, he's a writer, like he's going back to that memory well and getting it out of he's letting out the bad gunky, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like some of the metaphors and here in allegories are a little on the nose.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes I like that because sometimes I feel like I'm reading or I'm listening to this series on the DC Sniper, and there's a lot of child abuse in that story that I did not realize, and a lot of like domestic abuse, which is not violent. And I think a lot of times we kind of misconstrue abusive relationships as like what we see with Scott as a child. You know, if there is not physical violence, I think a lot of times we discount it as abusive. And sometimes I like when the story is really literal, because I think it's easier for me to make those connections and see what it actually is, because there's like, I've got some trauma in my past, which I've talked about, and most of it was not violent. And so there was a time when I was like, okay, well, am I repressing memories? Because it feels the same. So how can it feel the same when it wasn't causing the same pain? And I think there's like kind of an allegory here of like physical pain equating emotional pain, which is some of the self-harm stuff I want to get into a little later. But I feel like there's like the Boole hunt, like the yellow yarn like spreads into a million different things. And I'm like, ooh, we could really follow the trail down here, which are the books that I really love, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I wonder how much of that was, I mean, because as we discussed before, like, you know, he goes into the books when he's writing it and he just kind of goes, right? He just runs. I wonder how much of that came while he was writing it and it was like subconsciously, or did he actually set out to like say like, all right, well, these themes that I'm talking about really feel applicable to this style of storytelling I'm doing? Because like, I think you could make the case either way. I think I'd like to believe more that it's subconsciously and it actually proves the point more that by him.
For what it's worth,
you know.
I think, I mean, whatever everyone else's experiences is as a writer of fiction, like I think first time through that first draft, you don't know what you're getting, and the themes that emerge are pretty, like you'll see it on the second read and be like, oh wow, that's what I was working out, you know. But we know that, and also, can I point a structure and format question?
Yeah. Why
does the Boole hunt start when it does? Like, what is actually the precipitating event? Because if it's Zach McCool, how did he know that was going to happen? Or did he intend the Boole hunt to start a long time ago? And was the point of the Boole hunt that she get his story? I mean, I guess she never got the father killing part of the story when he was alive, right? And also, again, like, why now? Like, was it intended to start earlier, but since she put off his study, it didn't start then? Or did he have some kind of weird vision to the future where he knew she was going to be terrorized?
Yeah. I mean, because could you make the argument that it was Amanda? You know, that maybe
I thought that he saw maybe that she was going to have some kind of break.
Right. But then what's the Boole hunt about?
Yeah.
Like, it's not about bringing Amanda back.
No.
So that is to me like a pretty big flaw. Like, I mean, I like the book anyway, but there is even also, I was wondering how the miniseries was going to address this. And it is just like, it starts with her just kind of seeing the shovel, right?
Which I think about, if that's it, like when she's looking at these pictures, like, is that an emotional trigger for her? And that's kind of what brings all of this up. And I wonder how long that was sitting there, just kind of waiting for her to be ready, you know? And I kind of agree, because it does feel like one of those things where, like, I love the point that it's making and I love where it gets so much that I didn't even really think about why it started, you know?
Tinfoil hat for me right now. If you think of the ending, right, as this revelation towards his past, right? Well, so much of that revelation involves his own writing, because it is a piece of his own writing, and that is part of obviously it wouldn't be included in the collective works whenever the college comes. They're not going to be like, oh, hey, do you have that draft from the Booyah Moon that he left in the box for you? But let's just say, thematically and narratively, like, they are linked in the sense, because obviously this starts with the Inkunks looking for his works. And part of those, which just so happens to be that one of those works is this revelation that ties Lisey and Scott and Amanda together. So I'm wondering if there was an inevitability for her to find that, have that revelation whenever it came out to be, like, maybe the tip of the iceberg is the works that are in his barn, And that once that started, that discussion about those works started, she was going to go into the bull hunt, because like all the clues are pretty embedded within that area of her, you know, of where
I
she's
think
at,
that
you know?
to the degree that there is an intentional structure, it is sort of, I think he would argue that the bull hunt was planned far in advance, and there's just sort of a happenstance that Zach McCool gets involved at the same time.
Yeah.
Because sometimes whatever, the dog does take a 3-day journey. Sometimes, you know, like it is, sometimes coincidences do happen. I think it might be a little bit of a better book. Like sometimes you have to pull fiction back to make it seem more like fact, right?
Yeah.
Like, yes, weird things happen in real life, and you could write a novel that was full of nothing but weird things that all happen in real life, but people would have trouble getting into it, I think. And I think that it would have been kind of a cool structural thing if somehow either he literally foresaw that this was going to happen and created this bull hunt so that she would have some sort of process to like deal with the physical and literal manifestation of anger and obsession. Or that it was somehow Zach McCool that triggers it, like, or Jim Dooley or whatever you want to call him, that it is somehow like this obsessive fan that triggers it, like by accident, perhaps. I don't know. Like, it's a weird thing. Like like I said, I think King would probably say, oh, just, you know, she was supposed to go on the bull hunt anyway. And then also this guy shows up.
Yeah.
And it is true that they're not really connected.
They're not. Like, I feel like you can have the bull hunt without Zach McCool.
Yeah.
And so maybe if I think about what the purpose of the bull hunt is and what it is that he foresaw, maybe it's just her moving on and having a hard time letting go, especially since, like, as we see, she doesn't really have that much else in her life, you know?
Well, he doesn't tell us about that much else. I mean, I mean, I think that a real character, like, I think Tabby has plenty going on. You know?
Yeah. And I think the show is kind of adding a little more of that in, you know, with like the library stuff. But yeah. Sorry, Joanne, did you have a thought on that?
No, nothing else.
Okay.
I was just agreeing.
Well, so we talked about pulling back and bringing things back to the bull hunt. And you know what else brings you back is the hook. So shall we move on to a section that we call the hook? And I'm sorry for those who are going to be singing that song all day.
Ah, yes. Don't you see? Don't you see how clear it all is? Not only can you see the future, I can change it. You can change it, exactly.
All right. So the hook, and this is we've kind of been talking a little bit about the hook, but this is where we can talk about some of the themes of the novel and like what we think it is saying. And I found a quote in the book that I really loved because I think it speaks a lot to King's writing process. I was talking about a book as a bull hunt. And on page 418, in the other room, Amanda laughed at something in the movie. Lisey smiled a little to herself. She didn't believe Scott had exactly planned all this. He didn't even plan his books. As complex as some of them were, plotting them, he said, would take out all the fun. He claimed that for him, writing a book was like finding a brilliantly colored string in the grass and following it to see where it might lead. Sometimes the string broke and left you with nothing. But sometimes, if you were lucky, if you were brave, if you persevered, it brought you to a treasure. And the treasure was never the money you got for the book. The treasure was the book. Lisey supposed the Roger Dashmills of the world didn't believe it, and the Joseph Woodbodies thought it would be something grander, more exalted, but Lisey had lived with him and she believed it. Writing a book was a bull hunt. What he'd never told her, but she supposed she'd always guessed it, was that if the string didn't break, it always led back to the beach, back to the pool where we all go down to drink, to cast our nets, to swim, and sometimes to drown. And so, which I thought was really interesting. And if you've read On Writing, he does talk about, like, he just kind of starts writing. And he's also talked about, like, uncovering it like a fossil, like stories are like fossils and you don't see the full picture. But he also talks about going back and editing the theme. Like on the rewrite, you start to see themes emerging and you kind of dovetail things. Like I know he talked specifically about the Green Mile and kind of editing to fit more of a narrative theme. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of the theme here is that search. It's the hunt, you know? So I wonder if maybe that's why some of it at the beginning, maybe he was like, okay, I'm okay with maybe this not necessarily hanging together, you know?
I felt like, a theme that I hadn't thought about for this book in my first read, definitely, and I didn't even kind of see coming, is that this is a book about the relationship between creativity and madness.
Yes.
And
100%.
how sometimes maybe they're just the same.
Mm-hmm.
And he does, we mentioned there's a strange amount and choice of King's Dominion in this book.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, one of them is the arguments against insanity fall through with a soft shirring sound, which is lifted from The Shining.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually sort of on the margin, I was like, maybe this is the real sequel to The Shining.
I think you're on the right bull hunt there.
Yeah, because it's about an alcoholic writer tormented by his past, but an abusive father, and how he chooses to deal with it. It's sort of like, I think you could think of it, it's the other path Jack Torrance could have taken.
Yeah.
If Jack Torrance had been willing to dig into the stuff that he went through, rather than kind of write around it and try too hard, maybe work too hard. Jack works too hard. I'll work.
No play.
No play. Actually, that's, yes, I will take that, because what Scott does is infuse that dark history with playfulness, right? He laughs a lot. He makes a lot of jokes. There is a lightness to his childhood in addition to darkness. And then also the character of Amanda, is another example of where creativity and madness kind of like go back and forth. I think that I really like her.
Yeah,
I do too.
She's actually, I think, one of the most complete characters in the book. And also like, and even, and as people, I think I don't know for sure, but I know Jen and I have struggled with our own mental health issues and the ways that creativity does and doesn't help, I mean, I've found, Jen and I were just talking about this, but like when I am in the grip of something, my mind, I will be creative. I'm not going to write stories, but I do retreat, I do make up stories for myself. So anyway, the real sequel to The Shining. That's
I 100%
tagline.
Agree with that. No. And
I agree.
I've been thinking a lot about The Shining in a way with this too, because, prior to this, like that was always considered one of his more personal books, right? Just because, and I think that's one of the reasons why he's always been so defensive about the film adaptation, because it absolutely derails like what he was actually wrestling with on page. And I think that if you look at these two books together as a conjoined thing, like you're saying, like you look at C as The Shining as like what happens with the failure of writing, right? Where you just you don't produce anything and you just are just this creator, this failed creator, and what comes of that. And then you see something on the successful side where, you have the books, you have the success, you have the legacy, but what both share is the collateral damage, right? Of like what that sort of path to creativity entails. And that entails for like the person writing it and also the person that's surrounding and loved, the loved ones. And obviously we see with The Shining, doesn't work too well for them. But in this one, it doesn't really work too well either, because it does, but there's clearly there are bruises and there are cuts, there's bull blood to be shed. And I think that's one of the things that I find so actually really startling and revelatory, especially speaking personally about this book, because we praise success with creativity because the product sometimes, it speaks for itself, right? You're like, oh my God, this book, this movie, this painting, this song, timeless, changes the world. But we never really like peel back the layers. I'm like, what brought it to that point, right? And so more often than not, it actually it leads to the same grievances that it would have to those that failed. Like you were saying, Anna, like you do pour yourself into like creativity, and by pouring yourself into that, those loved ones that care about you and nurture you, there's that sweat equity that goes into it that I think King is trying to grapple with Lisey here. You see like, the madness that comes and having to like, be the person that nurtures that. And I don't know if
the anchor.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm also going to go back to, so in the comparison between the healthy-ish and unhealthy-ish ways of dealing with childhood trauma, that I see in Jack, like the tendency that I was talking about in terms of like when you're in trauma, you can be real creative. And he creates the universe, of the Overlook. Like that's his creativity. It doesn't go into his work. But with Scott, what happens is he takes the pain he has and he puts it out into the world. He doesn't do an interior imagination that's all just inside, which is, I think, what you could say Jack is doing. It's just very egotistical. It's very personal. It's like all his mind is creating this. Whereas Scott like pours it out, right? And lets people make of it what they will.
Yeah.
You know, like does not try to control how people interpret it at all. Right. He sort of is amused by what people see in his work, which I imagine is also how King feels sometimes. Right. And the other thing, I'm going to go back to how I think both books are also about what it's like to live with an active addict or alcoholic. Like, and they disappear. And you are left on the outside trying to figure it out from it is a bull hunt. Living with an active alcoholic is a bull hunt. That is actually my new favorite thing that I've said on this podcast.
Yep, it's true. Yeah.
It's a bloody bull too.
Yeah.
It can be, yes. Yeah, that was one of the things that I think I connected to the most this time. And not necessarily, or not just living with an active alcoholic, but also living with someone with a mental illness, which I think, I mean, not that those two things aren't always related, because there's some overlap there, but because I've been on both sides of that thing now, you know, like I did live with an active alcoholic and now I do have a mental illness, and it has really taken a toll on my marriage. And while I think we're doing good, like we you know, we're working through it and we go to therapy, but it's hard. And I think, like, maybe the first time I read it, I did not want to think about what I'm doing, what my healing is doing to Corey. And because I do really retreat, because intimacy is really scary for me in a lot of ways. But I can write it out on a page because the page can't respond to me, you know, and I don't have to defend myself from whatever the response is going to be. And so, like, I think when I look at Lisey's story, like she is, and when I look at mental health and how it's represented here, because I have some larger issues with it, I have just chosen to look at it through Lisey's act of giving Scott care and being the support structure there. And I think that's where I get the most out of it, and what that does to her and how it kind of informs her story. Because she absorbs a lot of this. And I think at the end, she starts talking about seeing the long boy, and it's now her long boy, and she realizes that she covered the mirror, which I think is interesting. Like that, I don't want to necessarily say she's a secondary victim of his trauma, but I mean, I think there's probably an element.
No, I think she should be going to Al-Anon.
Yes, I think so too.
And I also think I want to just endorse the living with an active addict or alcoholic and living with someone with mental illness. Addiction is by DSM a mental illness.
Is it?
And yeah. And also just to say that it's a disease. Like in both cases, there needs to be sympathy and empathy, because that person is being attacked, you know, by something that they can't control.
Yeah.
You know? And that is the thing that also, that's the long boy, right? Like that's the thing that makes life difficult with living with an active addict or alcoholic, or living with someone who's actively, you know, not able to manage their mental illness, is that it isn't them that's doing you harm. Right.
Right.
It is the disease. Like some people don't like the personification of that. I think it's really helpful.
Yeah, me too.
It's the disease that's torturing you, that's making your life difficult, that's lying to you, not the person.
Yeah, it's not that I don't want to be around anyone because I'm mean and I don't like them. It's because it's scary, you know? And I think like that's what the long boy is. And I think what I love about this story is that Lisey goes there with him. Like she goes to the pool. She meets him where he is in his mental illness and his addiction. And she really tries to understand. She doesn't try to like smooth out their daily life or like make a plan so that it doesn't affect anything, but not really treat it. You know, she really meets him where he is. And that was really moving to me, you know?
Yeah. I think what's really powerful about the long boy too is the sense that anxiety begets anxiety. You know, I think of like the stuff that I've brought to the table in my past relationships, and just from things that, you know, you liken the long boy earlier to the idea of, and especially with like even memory, just like the idea that it's this collective, you know, we just keeps changing, it keeps adding. And I kind of almost look at it as like when you take like, you see like a whole layer of dust, and you just like drag your finger, and the dust collects, keeps collecting on the finger. I could see like relationships work that way, and whatever you're going in, that you're going to share that DNA of whatever anxieties you have all too often. And that's something I've certainly thought about during the pandemic, where like you really are just the closest you've ever been to whoever your loved one is, because you're just in that space together. So you're really kind of seeing it manifest in ways that you might not have actually acknowledged or seen, when everyone's off in their own worlds outside of the house and stuff. But so that's something I really got out of this one too, in a lot of ways that he touches upon with like grief and trauma and self-harm. And I thought that idea of like Lisey being a conduit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that shared terror and bad gunky that the lawn boy has is like a parallel to like what Lisey is carrying also after all these years, and by proxy with her own sisters too. I mean, it's all shared, it's mutual, it's like we are our own universe. We are our own worlds that collide, and there's a lot of shared mutual DNA there in all those interactions. And I think that that's what this book kind of gets at, that I've been really thinking about a lot more than I have previously. And that's kind of one of my glowing takeaways, I would say, from this book.
I want to say one more thing about about Lisey and secondary trauma. That secondary trauma is a real term, and it's often like I first heard it in relation to school shootings, and how people even who weren't there, but there's the people who have to deal with it, and also like people who work in the helping professions also. But what I don't like about that is secondary trauma is trauma. It's not like, oh, it's less because it's like some, concentric circles that the nearer you are to the event, the more it affects you. That can be true, I guess. But also depending on who you are and what maybe mental health issues you bring to the table, it doesn't necessarily lessen. The event that sparks the trauma doesn't necessarily get, decrescendo, as it moves out. Like you can experience just as serious trauma secondarily, So.
Yeah. And one of the things I found this quote about cutting, because I want to talk about self-harm also, which was another thing that I really connected with. But the way, I'll just read the quote. So Scott is talking to Lisey. He said, I tried twice more. He said, tried, not tried. I used to think trying that last time was how I got him killed. Speaking of Paul, right up until tonight, I thought that. But talking about it, hearing myself talk about it has helped more than I ever would have believed. I guess psychoanalysis have got something like that old talking cure stuff after all, huh? Which I thought, when I think about what this book is really, it's about healing and it's about moving on, I think, is the grand theme that I connect it with. And I think we see really negative ways to do that, or really damaging ways to do that, and really positive ways to do it. Like his ultimate, getting the bad gunky, the worst gunky that he has, is writing the story to Lisey. And it's almost like there's almost this feeling of like he has gotten it all out and now it's complete, there's a release of everything. But a negative way that he lets that bad gunky out is something as self-harm. And I was really not prepared for how much self-harm there was in this book. I didn't remember what a bull was, I just didn't connect with it. And partly because, not to share too much, but the first time I read it, I wasn't engaging in that personally, and now it's something that I have struggled with, and I'm talking in therapy about it. So, the help is helping. But I found that really captivating, how that is a coping mechanism for both of them, I think, because there's self-harm, there's physical self-harm, and then there's cutting. There's a point where Lisey is being so cruel to him, and it's almost like he's just taking it and taking it and taking it, and then he puts his hand through the glass to say, stop hurting me, stop. And I guess that's not the same as self-harm, but there's this way of just letting all of the frustration out in ways that harm people.
From my experience and from what I pick up from the novel, I think him putting his hand through the greenhouse glass is something that happens in self-harm, which is that I'm feeling such intense pain emotionally. I have to hurt myself physically because that's the way I become congruent. Like that's the way I make my outsides match my insides. Right. Like, whereas in talk therapy, what happens is you just let out the pain. You get your insides and outsides to match by healing them both, which in an unhealthy way of dealing with those, that you make your insides and outsides match by hurting yourself because you're hurting so much on the inside. And it's also kind of distraction, and it's also kind of active penance, I think. And that he says, that's what he says. And it's completely incomprehensible to someone who's never experienced it. It's just completely like, I think that's actually kind of the parts that I like about the way that he, like Lisey, experiences Scott's illness, although this is too much focused on Scott, is that she's a smart, believable woman who nonetheless is baffled by what she's experienced. Like you cannot put your smarts, although I hate it that sometimes he says she thinks she's not smart. Ugh, stop. Right.
Yeah.
And also, I don't know, he does this thing where also he has like college is like the marker of a smart person, in King books.
Which
like,
is
so
pretty antiquated at that point.
Yeah. And like, I also don't see why. Anyway.
No, but the idea of penance is interesting. And the whole idea of him talking about how, like, we do the bad gunky, or we get out the bad gunky to say sorry. I hate that that like they use the word bad gunky because it's such a serious thing that they're discussing, and so it just it infantilizes it. But like I get it because that's where it's coming from in the story. But for me, I started reading this book and I was like, God, Scott, what an asshole! Like warning sign, warning sign, warning sign, and and it was just, and I was reading it with my girlfriend, who starts laughing, and I was like becoming more and more critical. And you could hear it also on the episodes for the first 2 episodes for Lisey's story, where I'm just basically being like, man, who the hell would I want to be with Scott? And as I'm reading it, it's funny because like I've said on this podcast how I relate to Jack Torrance a lot, and a lot of it is because I turn inward. Like there's nobody in the world I hate more than myself. Like that's where I always say there is such a vitriol for myself that it gets incorrigible sometimes. And a lot of that comes into the idea of what you're discussing on it with like penance, right? Where like I come from a Jewish household. Actually, I really even come from a religious household, but I was from a Jewish family that went to Catholic school. So 15 or 18 years of Catholic school of just learning about, guilt, forgiveness, and all this other stuff. I think it did subconsciously do something to me. But the idea of like punishing myself is so ingrained in my head, not just from like what I've learned from Catholicism all these years, and also just seeing my own parents like dealing with their own sort of ways they inflict harm on themselves for being upset about themselves. Like that's something that I've done forever. I mean, it's exactly what King's talking about with Scott. It's like I feel like to absolve myself, like I turn the blame on myself as if it's like some kind of reckoning. And so that was something that like, my girlfriend started laughing. She was like, well, it's funny that you hate Scott because like he's literally yourself in a lot of ways. Like I find myself in certain situations that are very similar, where it's like, because I'll often go off in my own world, which is usually in another room or something like that, just like saying like, "How you fucking idiot," and it's usually over the stupidest things too. And ultimately, what works better, and what she ultimately just is trying to say, and was relating it even to the book, is that like, isn't it so much better when you're just talking about it, like when you just get out and just explain, like, and just chat about like what's bothering you, as opposed to just internalizing it and then really hurting yourself in that way. And but then what I feel like happens is what we're talking about with like the Dakota secondary trauma, right? Like the idea like, well, we're sharing it and now you're experiencing these things and stuff. But I think you make the argument that it was already experiencing because we're living together, right? And so like if I'm unhappy and just in a dour mood and stuff like that, well, that's the sort of trauma itself. So anyway, sorry I got lost in the weeds there a little bit, but I feel like that's kind of like where I'm at, where that's where I found myself actually relating a lot to like the themes in this book in the way that I didn't expect to. And I just thought that was kind of a interesting 180 of from starting the book to the end with Scott. But anyway, I digress. Apologize.
Well, and I'm really glad that we're talking about this, because that's the thing that I connected most strongly with too. And it's like he's got this running interior monologue, because I feel you on that. Like I hate myself a lot of times. There's they're just negative thoughts, which I mean is, I think, a lot of times a result of growing up with a dad that is similar to Scott's dad, although not nearly as violent, which I've talked about on other shows, so I'm not going to digress there. But like that idea that I'm shit like runs through my head all the time,
Yeah.
And I found like this quote where Scott is talking about killing his father. And he says, I brought it down, Lisey. I brought it down in love. I swear, and I killed my father. I thought I might have to hit him with it again, but that single blow was enough. And all my life, it's been on my mind. All my life, it's been the thought inside every thought. I get up thinking I killed my father and go to bed thinking it. It has moved like a ghost behind every line I ever wrote in every novel, any story. I killed my father. I told you that day under the yum yum tree, and I think that gave me just enough relief to keep me from exploding completely 5 years or 10 or 15 down the line. But a statement isn't the same as telling. And I think about like when you have internalized this idea that there is something wrong with you, or that you are not enough, or you are good enough, like you hear that in every criticism anyone ever says, and so when Lisey is mad at him and yelling, it's like she's hurting him. And by cutting, which is something like, I think, you don't have to hurt me for this thing. I know that I am shit, and I'm going to hurt myself to prove to you that you can stop hurting me. Stop. It's like a defense in a way too. And it's like, I understand this hurting myself is a way to show the world that I didn't forget that I was wrong about that I, that there's something wrong with me. And I say all of this, I really worry a lot about ideation with self-harm. Because I don't want to, like I've talked about this a little before. I had to stop watching Sharp Objects because it was really getting in my head, There, like, I'm not condoning any of this stuff. These are negative coping skills. But I think we need to talk about this more. I wish that people talked about self-harm more, because it was something I was really scared to talk about for a long time,
Yeah.
I will pop in to say that, as someone who's struggled with various forms of, I actually think of drinking and drug abuse as forms of self-harm.
Oh,
I do
totally.
too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And also struggled with suicidal ideations. I actually am a suicide attempt survivor. Actually, it's good I'm saying that for a reason, right? Because it's okay to say that.
Mm-hmm. It is okay to say that, yes.
And something I said once on a podcast has the most emails, tweets I've ever gotten in terms of people saying, thank you. I'd never thought of this before. I thought I was the only one. Is when I talked about, I had my first suicidal ideation when I was about 9 or 10, and it never stopped. It was always an option in my head. If things got really bad, I can always commit suicide.
Yep. And
it was an option in that when I would see a way of doing it, like standing somewhere high, standing next to a train track, like a lot of times it'd be like, wow, if I wanted to, I could commit suicide right now. And it wasn't until I got to rehab where I had a counselor point out that that's not normal. And also that I didn't have to live that way. That it would be possible for me to have a life where that wasn't something that was always on my mind. And I just get so many people telling me they also never thought it was they never realized that there was another way to live, and they thought maybe everybody always had suicide as an option. It was a revelation to me to be like, wait, you don't? Like the counselor, like, that's not something you think about? Nope.
Yeah.
And she had me, or he actually, had me keep a journal of how many, during my stay, like how many times I thought about it, which showed me like, oh yeah, this is weird. I don't want to use the word weird, but it's something you don't have to live with. It is. And also the more people do it, the more suicidal ideation you have, like the more likely you are to actually go through with it. And so talk about it, tell somebody. I've also a veteran of calling a helpline, an anonymous helpline. I want to tell people right now, like calling the suicide hotline, that's what they're there for. And there's no such thing as too small a problem. If you think you're suffering from something, it's like, and it seems trivial and like, oh, why do I, no one will, this person will laugh at me when I tell them that I'm feeling suicidal because I got a B on a paper. Nope. It's all good. And the person on the other end of that line will tell you that. In fact, the time that I called, I thought I had a small problem. And I said, I don't know if this is enough of a reason to call you. And she said, if you think it's enough. Sorry, that's my ad for getting help.
Yeah.
Knowing that you don't have to, and I don't live that way today.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the other thing that you don't have to live with is like this idea that he killed his father. Like one of the big revelations for me was like a lot of the stuff that I had been beating myself up for a long time about was like, no, you were a child. You were not the responsible party here. Like it sometimes like that's what therapy has helped me see is kind of reframing that too. Like I can just choose to believe that this was not my fault and that I'm not shit, you know?
Yeah, and I guess that's what Lisey comes to represent for him. Is that that light that's how he gets to able to come around on things. Which there's a lot of problematic notions about that, but at the same time, it's realistic. People are the ones that drag you out of the darkness a lot of the times, and I'm not going to lie and say that I've not been pulled off the edge from people that I've been the closest to. And I guess that, that's just part of life. I think that's part of what love is, right? I mean, obviously not to that degree all the time, but I think that's a big part of what we, it's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes, I guess, in a way, without which being pedantic about it. But I think that's kind of I think that's one of the scares and scars of love in a way. Certainly something that I feel like King gets at with some realism here. That certainly hit me hard. Reading it. So
yeah, because there's the idea about his father, and maybe we can kind of shift into talking a little bit about abuse that's not self-inflicted. Because like one of the other things that really struck me was when Scott's talking about why he doesn't leave the house, which is something that I have had to explain to people why I did not leave my first husband sooner than I did. That's not true. I actually didn't leave him. He left me, but that's a story for another day. But he's talking about like that love, and that love is what connects you. And sometimes that it just complicates everything. But he says, his dad is asking him to leave, and he's saying, there's like $700 somewhere. You can take it. You can leave. And Scott says, I tell him again, I can't go. Why not? But I can't explain. Some of it is having lived almost my whole life in that farmhouse with almost no one for company but Daddy and Paul. What I know of other places I've gotten mostly from three sources: the television, the radio, and my imagination. Yes, I've been to the movies, and I've been to the Berg half a dozen times, but always with my father and big brother. The thought of going out into that soaring strangeness alone scares the living Jesus out of me. And more to the point, I love him. Not in the simple and uncomplicated, until the last few weeks at least, way I loved Paul, but yes, I love him. He has cut me and hit me and called me smuckhead and nummy and gluefoot mother smucker. He's terrorized many of my childhood days and sent me to bed on many nights feeling small and stupid and worthless. But those bad times have yielded their own perverse treasures. They have turned each kiss to gold, each of his compliments, even the most offhand, into things to be treasured. And even at 10, because I'm his son, his blood maybe, I understand that his kisses and compliments are always sincere. They are always true things. He is a monster, but the monster is not incapable of love. That was the horror of my father, little Lisey. He loved his boys. And that has been on my mind a lot recently because, as I've talked about in another show, I'm having a lot of issues with my father right now, and I'm trying to decide if I want to stay in contact. And so I think if we look at like Scott's relationship with his father and Scott's relationship with Lisey, like there's a big part of me that says, Lisey, don't marry him. You don't have to stay in this relationship, because a lot of what he said, I used to stay in my first marriage, and I was scared to leave because I didn't know anything else. That's where a lot of my internal like negative interjects, which is what kind of how I define them, come from. It's just, I don't know any better. And once you start to see better, you get a little more courage, but it takes a while, And he talks about the duty of love, which is, I think it's interesting that Zach McCool is the one to bring that up. And in my notes, I wrote, no, you are not obligated to stay with someone who hurt you. And I just want to say that to everyone. You do not have to stay with someone who hurts you. There are ways to help people. And I think it's admirable the way Lisey does support Scott. And I think his abuse is, I don't think he's abusive to her. I don't know. I guess we could piece that apart, but it's a different relationship, but she stays because she loves him, and he deserves someone to love him too. So I don't know. That's where I get really complicated with my thoughts on that,
I will say that like She does put up with a lot, and it is okay to leave if you're in a situation in which someone disappears every once in a while, like, and doesn't explain it or doesn't tell you about it. I think that's the part of their marriage that I feel like is the unhealthy part. Again, I don't know if he's literally supposed to be an active addict or alcoholic, but that disappearing, the actual, drinking, to me is a good kind of metaphor, or someone with mental illness, right? You don't leave someone just because of that. Of course, I don't think that's necessarily the thing to do. But if that person is in a place of not getting help, then it's not on you to be the only person helping.
Yep. And that was when I did.
If they're not helping themselves, then it's okay to be like, all right, this is not a one person job.
Yeah.
And I think the periods where Scott's not writing, where he's not working on himself, those are the danger periods, right? That's when he disappears in Germany. And then again, whatever, during the winter of that time. Like those I'd liken to a time when, if you were ever going to leave somebody, it seems cruel maybe to do it like when they're at their worst, but also it's just not on you.
Yeah.
It just isn't.
Yeah. I mean, I'll never forget.
You can make that choice.
Yes. And it is an okay choice to make.
It's okay choice, but it's also okay choice to be like, I can't handle this.
Yeah. Oh, and that's something that my instructor actually had to tell me in college. Because I had written about just growing up with my mother who's just gone through tons of addiction and alcoholism and all this other stuff. And, she had relapsed like multiple times. And I think around the fifth or sixth time, it just became like, I can't do this anymore. And I was really struggling with that. I was like, well, I don't know. I mean, she's family, right? Well, she's family. I can't, you can't walk. You got to keep, you got to keep fighting. You got to keep going. And I remember like just my instructor pulling me aside after like the essays, because they had asked for like, all right, let's do a personal lesson, and I guess I just took it a little too literal on there. And so she pulled me aside afterwards, and she was like, hey, can we talk? And she was just like, I dealt with this also, and it just let you know that like you can move on, like you don't have to keep going back to the well, trying to keep working on it. And at some point you do have to acknowledge that like it's not your job to make sure that they are always going to stay and come back, because if it's at a long enough timeline, like you just can't, like and if you keep doing it, I feel like you kind of slip into that madness too, in a way. And I certainly have, but it was really revelatory for me, because it was just like that option just didn't register. It's something that my brother and I have had to struggle with like for years on it, and that we keep going back, because like you make that decision, and then years later, like, okay, well, let's reconnect. And then all those decisions are coming back again. And it's just like, so it's like the cycle that's like, it's like to borrow from King, cause a wheel. And so it is really hard. Yeah. I found it is hard to make that decision. It's like depths of darkness in a way. Like, well, it can get darker, if you stay on there.
I did my ad for the suicide hotline. Now I'm going to do another ad for Al-Anon, which, if people don't know, that's not another name for AA. It's a group that's intended to help those who have people with alcoholism and addiction in their lives. And it's also a 12-step program, and it's focused on healing you, not on the person. It is not about, some people think it's about, oh, they're going to teach me how to like be the most helpful to my husband who's an active alcoholic. No. What it does is teach you how to be responsible for yourself. And it's an incredible program. It has saved as many lives as AA, I would say. And some of us are double winners, they call them. I'm in both programs, but people don't talk about it a lot. So I'm just you can look it up in the yellow, well, no one has yellow pages, but you can look it up. And there are meetings, it's the same, it's a 12-step program. Often they share clubhouses with AA clubhouses, with AA groups, which is kind of funny. But Michael, you might consider, I don't know.
Yeah, no. It's funny because like it's actually like I guess a lot of this is all coming out because I was going to be on the King episode, the recovery and addiction episode, and I think like 48 hours I just got like beforehand I just got really nervous about it, and I remember texting Jen. I was just like, I just don't think I could do this. Like because a part of me was like, well, I don't really want to go too far into like my own mother's stuff, but Yeah, it's just because it is, but I guess it makes sense for Lisey's story because, as it is, it's like, yes, it is about Lisey, but it also is about, so much about Scott's trauma. And so I guess I guess that's why I feel a little more comfortable bringing it out right now, just because I'm not going to go into, the depth of the iceberg. But the collateral damage of it is just what was my biggest takeaway from a lot of what King was discussing here. And I think that's kind of what you get from Lisey, which in hindsight, and I guess we could talk a little bit more about this character. Like, I do wish we knew more about like what actually personal traumas Lisey was going through, on her own, that weren't specifically tied to Scott.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe that one of the
I have a
pitfalls
really good idea about why Lisey loves Scott, right?
Yeah.
I don't know why he loves Lisey. Like, she seems like a good person, and she's game for a good laugh, and they apparently have great sex. Pound cake is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
So much pound cake. Gorging on the pound cake.
Pound cake with a side of salad, you might say.
Yes, I do mean that. Which I think the first time I read this book, I was like, huh?
Yeah, me too.
I thought, well, anyway, you don't really have a sense of like what's attractive about her besides her kind of blank canvasness. Like, but I don't think she's a recovery project. I don't think she came into the marriage as someone that Scott could project onto. And yet we don't really see like what you might fall in love with about her. Like, I believe he loved her. That's not the problem, right?
Yeah.
But anyway.
No, I agree. I think that's one of the big, it's at the end, despite it being, I guess that's the irony.
It's like he loves her because she loves, actually at one point he says that he loves her because she loves him, which is actually super common for addicts to say.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder if part of what he loves about her is that she absorbs a lot of his pain, which is like growing up with, because she says good ma over and over again. So I want to know what's good about this ma, what's the bad ma, and we don't ever really get there. But I mean, that implies a similar kind of childhood. And so I often think like, I saw this tweet the other day that was like, oh, you're so kind and considerate. And I said, thanks. I grew up having to anticipate the needs of everyone for survival. It was something like that. But like, I wonder if that's what it is about Lisey that he loves, is that she is not going to leave him and that she will absorb it. And to clunkily transition, I think we find that no one is only a hero or only a villain. There's a combination. And so maybe that can lead us into our next section, heroes and villains.
I'm gonna have to kill this fucking clown. Welcome to the Losers Club, asshole!
Welcome back to Heroes and Villains. This is where we talk about the characters. And so we started talking about Lisey. So let's continue talking about Lisey. So
I think we could probably move on. Honestly, I thought you were going to say, like, we talked a lot about Lisey, so let's talk about some of the other characters. And I do think I want to get into the secondary characters because some of them are really interesting.
I do too. Yeah. The only thing I think there's still left to talk about Lisey, and it's one of the things that I love about her, is this grief. Like, I think the other part of this book, I think the more visible part is dealing with the loss of a loved one or a loss of a partner. And there's just some beautiful passages where she talks about that. And I think I can relate to that. Like, I've never lost a spouse, but I have been through a divorce and I have lost emotions or relationships that mean a lot to me. But yeah, do we have any thoughts about Lisey and grief and just moving on?
Yeah, actually, I think this is why I personally resonate with the book, just from a grief standpoint. I just think that, Lisey becomes a very relatable character because of what she's gone through, and the fact that King is able to like tap into our greatest, fears and nightmares, and, the unbearable pain of like losing a loved one. And like, I haven't lost a spouse or a partner, but I lost my dad when I was quite young. And that's why whenever I read this book, just some of the descriptions, probably the quotes that you were talking about, it has so many of my favorite quotes about, grief and like how you feel, even the day-to-day kind of, process afterwards, where some days you feel, completely fine, and then other days it kind of just hits you out of nowhere. And I think that's why I relate to Lisey in that way. Because I think that a lot of my favorite King books are the ones that are kind of rooted in grief. So, you know, Pet Sematary, even Doomadgee, and even Bag of Bones as well. There's some sections in there that I really resonate with. So I kind of think, you know, that's why I have the connection to the novel, because I think it does a really good job of portraying, you know, moving on from like a great loss like that.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think of a King novel that doesn't deal with grief.
That is true.
Yeah.
Like, the ones where it's more kind of prevalent.
It's a big theme, you know?
Yeah.
I actually came up, I think maybe Salem's Lot and Christine, like some of the more straightforward horror stuff.
Yeah.
But even then, because Salem's Lot happens because he loses his parents, right? Or his mom sends him off to live with his aunt.
Yeah.
But it's not really the center. I would say, you know, I wish I was on the Salem's Lot show, but
well, let's just say we might have an opportunity in the future because we got an idea. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave that out there. But yeah.
That's actually in my top 5 for King.
Salem's Lot.
I love Salem's Lot. It's the
I
world
think
building
it
in
has
that
some
is
of the
unreal.
coolest writing, and the stuff with the girl is like a little whatever, but he's never real good at that. And that was early on, even. So he was
a bit clunky.
a bit clunky. Anyway, sorry. Yes, grief.
But what I like about this is that the book touches upon something that I tend to do and bother everyone about is I'm really big on playing like the 1 week, the 1 day, or the 1 year game. Where I'm like, oh God, a week ago we were at yada yada yada, and like it's almost like that you know in Seinfeld when the guy like hears Desperado and just like zones out, like that's kind of how I am a lot of the times with like memory and nostalgia. And it's just like, Elaine, could you just but I'm the same way when it comes to memories and triggers of certain emotions. And you know, like if I hear a song that I might have remembered, it might have been big in like the summer of '96 for me or something like that, like I'll just like come off in a daze and I'll just go in that world. And I think that one of the things I really love about King's writing here, especially through Lisey, is that as she's going through these artifacts, and they are triggers to these memories and these stories that are within. And I think that's one of the more powerful notions at the end, is that like you ultimately have to sometimes box this stuff away, right? Like you can't be near this stuff because and so much of that just can tie even just to relationships in general. Is that like as much as we don't want to admit it, like, you know, those loved ones that we cherish and we adore, and the most important people in the world to us, like at some point, like sometimes we do need to just erase them because it's so hard to deal with like the memories, the stories, everything that goes in between, because you can end up like the characters in Booyah Moon near the pool, where you're just like vanishing and staring off into and like thinking about it over and over again, and it just follows you and follows you and follows you. So that was one of the takeaways I thought of Lisey that was really smart here, that I thought like was really true to life. Because I just think of even like, you know, I've lost a couple of people, but nothing like, mostly I was just relating it mostly to like the idea of relationships, right? And like how like sometimes they ran, and you know I'm thinking about my former marriage. It was a great marriage. You know, we had a great run, and we ended up being like, yeah, we love each other, but you know, it just didn't work out. And like, you know, there are certain things I boxed and put away. I was like, I don't want it now. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to have it. And I think that's kind of like a natural part of life that we don't really want to admit sometimes, is that we do actually need to delete things to move on. I don't know. It's a long-winded way.
No, memory. Although, if you want to extend the metaphor, like she does donate the boxes. Like
she does, yeah.
And I actually think this book is an argument for not forgetting. Like for how we do forget, and that can be healthy. And I don't think Lisey is never blamed for having a purple curtain, right? Like of course she does. Yeah. But every once in a while, you have to go back and visit those, or else they don't get out, or else the bad gunky stays in. And I think, I just think it's an argument for remembering and having to process.
Yeah, right? I mean, because even at the end, she does have that. She does carry that one thing, right? Is like the antimatter or the anti-magic, I think she calls it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you're right, but I think both things are true, because sometimes I do need to put it away.
Yeah,
I cannot
sure.
deal with this today, because I've got to make lunch and I've got to like go to work. But I think what we find and what I see ultimately in Scott's death, which I actually like how they represented this in the miniseries a lot. And it kind of pulled everything to get some things together in my mind, is that this story is about untreated mental illness, which I think is important. Like, as much as Amanda gets medical attention, nobody gets treatment for any of this. Now, they are self-treating because, like, by writing and by talking, like, that's a form of kind of helping yourself. But
I actually have what might be related, like with the untreated mental illness quote. This is my, I was going to save it for word processor, but she's talking about Amanda. Because the Amandas of the world were just made that way. You kept expecting them to fall down and thinking it was a miracle they didn't. And finally, the miracle got tired of happening and fell over and took a seizure and died.
Ooh, I don't remember that quote, but yeah. And that's what I think ultimately the Bull Hunt is finding it, going through these memories and unpacking, like she's packed them away because it was too hard to look at right now. One of the things I found really moving was talking about like kind of going through the day and realizing that the dryer wasn't filling, or the laundry wasn't filling up as fast as it did. Like you stumble over these reminders,
things, as well.
My dishwasher. I only run my dishwasher like twice a week.
Yeah. And those are the things that you live with every day. And I think, not to get all Nashville about it, especially with this book, because Nashville doesn't come out. Nashville's a pretty cool place, despite
the book.
Things.
Yeah. Sorry, I was like Nashville's great.
It is great. Yeah. But I was going to bring up a Garth Brooks song is the reason I brought up Nashville, because there's a song called "The Storm." Where there's a line where it's a divorce story about a divorce, and she says her friends have all gone back to their lives thinking she will be all right. And what I think we see her, like, I love that it starts 2 years after he's died, not right after, because this is the actual moving on. She has packed it away because she couldn't handle it at the time, and now she's ready to start doing it, or she thinks she's ready, but she needs support. And that's what I find, because it's hard, and I think another thing that is unique about Lisey is people keep saying, "Oh, I'm sorry for your loss," as if it just happened yesterday, so it's like they keep like picking away at that wound, and so can she ever truly move on if she is constantly reminded of this?
Yeah. And I think that's kind of what I gathered from the ending, because it's really like, it's pretty shut. Like, even when she says like, I finally erased the ghost of Scott. And you like, on the surface level, that's like, it seems like almost like a damning thing to say, but it's pretty realistic, I feel. Like, you kind of have to erase it sometimes, like to be able to move on, to be able to find that next step, that next chapter.
She carries the Afghan around with her always.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, in his death, like, I read it as it catching up to him. Everything that he has repressed or tried to get out in cutting, like, it doesn't go away. And that was one of the biggest things that I had to really grapple with in getting therapy, is that I am a different person now because of the things that have happened to me. I'm not going to go back. Like, I just go forward, and you figure out how to live with it. And I think that's maybe what carrying around the little African is, the Afghan. I really kind of don't like that they use that. Anyways, that's a whole nother story. But like, that's that reminder of like, it's like the ending of the Babadook. It's like, we can keep working through this. I'm carrying this reminder with me. But I think the ultimate healing that Lisey finds is that it doesn't have to be every minute of every day. She doesn't have to always think of it,
Can I comment on the Afghan thing as a metaphor? So I thought where they were going with it was, you can't reknit something, right? It's not going to be the same blanket. If you reknit as a knitter, if you reknit something, it's not going to be the same. Like, even if you follow the same pattern, it's going to be different because of like all the different tensions and like the way that the yarn might be stretched out in some places and knotted in others. So when the yarn unravels, I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like, it's both something she followed, right? And yet also the Afghan is no longer the same thing that it was. But then she apparently has enough of it that she can carry around like squares of it. Like
it's like a never-ending gobstopper of an Afghan.
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Well, that's
Yeah.
kind of like what you are with, in terms of, I mean, it's the evolution of, right? You know, the human condition. Like, it's like, you know, the relationship changes you. You're not the same person you were before that relationship. I can see that almost applying to that metaphor in a way. So I did want to ask about Lisey for a second. That, like, what were your thoughts on the fact that, like, you know, because when she talks about her sisters, sometimes it can come off as a little dismissive. And I feel like her sisters are dealing with their own stuff too. And maybe it's just Lisey being like, all right, I got Scott to worry about. I can't add even more than my plate. But there are moments where it's like a little dismissive in the sense that, like, so in like page 269, or at least in my book, it's 269. I don't know. But she goes like, Lisey smiled a little at this as her fingers moved to the hinges at the back of the box. It was a smile of relief. Here was Darla the drama queen, Darla the diva, and that meant they were back on safe ground. Two sisters with well-worn scripts in hand. At one end of the wire is Darla the sensitive. Give her a hand, ladies and gentlemen. At the other end, little Lisey, small but tough. Let's hear it for her. Like, I mean, I guess she's being a realist of it all. But there's also other moments too, and she's just like, you know, never occurred to any of you that Lisey has problems of her own. I think it's like on page 110. And I guess for as little as we get of like Lisey's own sort of personal you know, traumas and anxieties, the bits that we do get there, I get the sense that she's frustrated, and, you know, she's more increasingly frustrated by her own family than she's even over Scott. And I kind of wish we
Al-Anon.
I know that's
really she's got some bad codependency
Right,
issues.
yeah.
And that's also another program for people. It's Codependence Anonymous, another great program. If you
I loved my Coda group. I have fond
you
memories.
feel like the alcoholic or addict in your life isn't the thing that you're focused on, but you do have relationship issues, I can also recommend Coda. But yeah, I think that, yes, Lisey is just a helper. Like in this book, like she doesn't have her own goals. And like, again, I appreciated that the TV show gave her some stuff to do, but we hear nothing of her goals. Like, part of me was like, because as someone recently single-ish, I'm like, so what can I do now? Like, I kind of forced myself to, you know, even though I'm also grieving, to be like, so what can I do with this now? What are my freedoms or changes that are maybe something that I can, you know, take advantage of? And it's like walking around the house naked, and sorry, maybe I shouldn't have said that, but leaving the door open when I go to the bathroom, you know, having chicken tenders for dinner 5 nights in a row. And like, even shit like that would have been nice. But also, like, I've been thinking about travel, you know, I've been thinking about like going to do like a fellowship somewhere, you know. Doesn't Lisey have shit she wants to do? Yeah.
You're right. No, you're right. Because honestly, that's like the first thing I tell people when they get in a breakup. I'm like, you're not going to see it right now, but like, this is going to be the best time of your life because it's all on you. You could do whatever the fuck you want. You could literally do whatever you want, and you write the chapter yourself. And yeah, I do agree. I kind of wish we saw a little bit of her own chapter writing here. Like maybe there's an actual one. It's like, well, actually, Lisey's story. Like, or another Lisey story.
Like Lisey goes back to school and gets a degree in chemical or biochemical, whatever. She decides she wants to know more about. Like, she becomes a physical therapist. I had to kind of search around for like what. It would be a helping profession, but she decides she wants to know like the science behind something, and like to really understand and get at like what the problems that people are dealing with. And she makes that an active goal.
Yeah.
And it gets reimbursed for it. Like her labor actually is valued.
Yeah. And she has a dog.
Part 2.
Like, you know?
Also, the part where they're like, we didn't get a dog because we didn't have children. I'm like,
oh yeah,
I know. That was like, come on.
My pets are my children.
Yeah.
So
right. That's the logic of a person who had children very young, I think. So we've talked a lot about Lisey, and is there anything else we want to say about Scott, or should we maybe move on to some of the secondary characters and kind of break out of this little relationship that we've been in, that we've been talking about?
It's okay to leave.
It is okay to leave. It's okay to talk about Amanda. So let's talk about Amanda, because I love her, and she is Lisey's oldest sister. She is also I really love the relationship that she has with Scott, although I kind of wish that we had more of that. But I just love her. And the quote that I found that I think I really identified with is on page 374, when Lisey is describing Amanda, said, "Once upon a time, before she had become so outwardly angry and so inwardly afraid." And I just loved that, because I think like Amanda has so much pain that comes out as really harsh language, and she does a lot of self-harm as well. And it's just something I feel like people think that I'm mad or I don't like them or I'm aloof a lot of times, but it's because that is an easier way for me to express some of the things that are living inside me. So that, and I know that we talked on our Alien episode about anger, and in our recovery, we've talked a lot about this, about anger being the outward manifestation of a lot of internal pain. So I loved that sentence.
Yeah, I love Amanda. I think that she kind of reminds me of Laura Palmer in Twin Peaks a little bit. Where they keep saying like Laura's the one. I almost feel like Amanda's the one, because she ends up being like the skeleton key for a lot of the narrative here. And I like a lot of the stuff with her. I feel like what we're able to see through her, what she gleans to Scott and to Lisey, like there's a lot there.
We know more about Amanda than we do about Lisey.
Yeah. Right?
In terms of like her inner life. Yeah, and she is great. And that quote that I read earlier about what it's like to live with someone with mental illness, the miracle stops happening. Obviously it's true for Amanda. And I think there's never pity for her. Like she always has weirdly a kind of agency. Like, even when she goes away, like it's a choice to stay there. I mean, it's complicated if you compare that to mental illness, I guess. But I also really liked the idea that I mean, this is a common King thing, but that there is the place that we create, we all share it. That there's actually no such thing as a completely individual imaginary place. Like it's all going to be kind of one part of the same geography. I liked that a lot.
Yeah, I have actually two favorite Amanda moments. One of them is whenever she says to Lisey, "You always wear the steel in his spine," and I feel like she's kind of one of the ones that sees behind what the public see as this great figure, and she knows that Lisey is actually his anchor and the one that always kind of brings him back. And then the other moment that I love is whenever Lisey kind of tells her plan to kill Zach McCool, and she's just basically like, "Kill him, I have no problem with that." And again, I just kind of love that sisterly bond of like, whatever you want to do, I've got your back. And I think Amanda's a great character. And also the way obviously she interacts with Scott, and the fact that they can like see something in each other. And there's also a quote where at one point he says to Lisey, "We knew each other the way the only two people not drinking at a big booze up know each other." And I thought that was a really great line as well.
Yeah. Resonated for me for sure.
Me too. Yeah, that was one that I flagged, and I'd actually lost the page number, so I'm glad you read that one. Yeah, and I think that is something like that's the power of talking, and that's the power of sharing your stories, is that other people see something. Like I will hear people talk, and they'll just kind of casually mention things or phrase things in a way where I'm like, I wonder if you have struggled with addiction, or I wonder if you share my mental illness, And I love that they see each other at the pool, and they understand, and so Scott is able to help her, and that's when I think about the driving force of a lot of what I do, it's because I have been in that place where I felt like I was the only one, and nobody understood. And I think Amanda finds that she is not the only one, and that there is somebody that can help her and that does care enough to do it. And I think that's really, really powerful.
Yeah. And I like the respect that Lisey gives towards Amanda too, early on as well. I mean, like on page 22, in my edition, which is pretty thin actually, into the book, she writes, there'd never been a keep out sign on the door. She's talking about the study. She'd been up here lots of times when he was alive, and Scott was always glad to see her, but it had taken Amanda to see what was in the belly of the book snake sleeping against the south wall. Quick to offense Amanda, suspicious Amanda, OCD Amanda, who had somehow become convinced that her house would burn flat if she didn't load the kitchen stove with exactly 3 maple chunks at a time, no more or no less. I relate, Amanda. Amanda, whose unalterable habit was to turn around 3 times on her stoop if she had to go back into the house for something she'd forgotten. Look at that stuff, or listen to her counting strokes as she brushed her teeth. And you could easily write Amanda off as just another gonzo, bonky old maid. Somebody write that lady of prescription for Zoloft or Prozac. But without Amanda, does little Lisey ever realize there are hundreds of pictures of her dead husband up there, just waiting for her to look at them? Hundreds of memories waiting to be called forth, and most of them surely more pleasant than the memory of Dashmill, that southern chicken shit coward. Yeah, so I mean, early on, they make it clear that Amanda really is important, not only to Lisey's life, but the story. And so King pretty much gives a lot of agency into her character, which made me wonder, just because I'm always trying the real life logic, like who in Tabby's sisters are...
The crazy one?
Is the Amanda? Yeah. Right?
I'm sorry, I shouldn't use... I try not to use crazy too flippantly. Yeah. I also will say, yes, but you've reminded me that just in the edit that King did for the miniseries, eliminating the sisters we don't actually meet. Good idea.
Yes.
Yes.
Because they're it's kind of weird to have them in the book. Cause like we don't like they're just like chattering in the background and there's no like reason to have them. So,
Yeah. I was kind of let down when you finally do. It was the last sister that she's coming into town. Canty. She gets in the story and it's like, nothing happens. I was like, well, what was the point of having this character? Like, it's like
exactly.
It's just so strange.
There's
so I agree. Yeah,
completely no reason to have those characters. They're just not there. I mean, the only purpose that they serve plot wise is after Lisey gets Amanda out of Green Lawn, and they have to make up a story about why she's out. Like, yeah, you'd have to do that, but you also could have subbed in somebody else for that. Like,
yeah.
I guess because in making that up, we see a side of Amanda's personality come out, right? Like the co-conspirator side, when they together come up with that story and together on the phone get Darla or whoever it was off their back.
Yeah, because I do love when, and you could even see the energy in King's writing, like when Amanda comes to, and like in it to another Twin Peaks reference is almost like when Dougie becomes Coop again. It's there's a spirit in the air, and King gets a little cheeky with the writing, but you can tell that like he'd been waiting this entire time for Amanda to come back so that they could have that banter back and forth and have these like little jokes and all those things that King has observed with Tabby and her sisters, like are in those chapters when they finally escape, from the clinic and all. And so I actually do really like when you have that other voice with Lisey, and you get to kind of get a little bit more of Lisey, and you get obviously more of Amanda because she's not in the fugue state that she was in before. And so I do like those chapters, and then I do think that you get a little bit more when Darla's in there too, because you get a different type of energy. But I think the miniseries, it's another one what you were talking about, Anna, before. It's like I think that King realizes that power. And that's why, like, I think in the miniseries he leans on it a little bit more, which is why like Darla's involved a little bit more in the miniseries too. Whereas in here she's kind of like a corollary presence in a way. But yeah, no, I mean, I really dig these chapters here. It kind of reminds me of it's just there's a lot of inside baseball to it where you can kind of tell that like these are a lot of these inside jokes and back and forth or things he's probably heard like in the other room before.
Yeah. And I think we've talked about the sister. I do want to call out that I hate the name Cantata. I'm sorry if we're listening and your name is Cantata.
Doesn't she name
it? Yeah.
Oh,
like
yeah.
clearly an inside joke, I guess. Like
I know. Although I will say I did know a choir director who named his kids tenor, treble, tetra, and timbre.
That's terrible. That's cruel.
I know. And if you're listening right now, you're fantastic. And I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, plus the nickname is Canty, which nobody wants that nickname,
No.
Although I guess it's close to a nickname that you would want even less.
It's also weird, like the rural Maine or New Hampshire, wherever she's from, family has like these musical names. I mean, sure, like you can be into classical music in rural Maine. It just doesn't quite, like we don't hear... Like it turns out that their mom was like one point a classical pianist, and like that's whatever.
Yeah, even it was a wise update to the miniseries, is where I think I'll leave it. But let's
can we go tertiary now?
Yeah, shall we move on to? Well, who would you like to go to, Anna?
Well, it's more of a theme. but it's something I really liked, which is that when Lisey recognizes the deputies as full people, because it's almost a commentary on secondary characters in novels, right?
Yeah.
Like that all of these people have their own story, that you can see that someone is like a supporting character in your own drama, right? But that for the guy who used to play football and has the nickname, like he has this whole past and this whole history, and she has that revelation, right? And where she's like, oh, these are real people. And I just think sometimes we have to remember that, like we can all get caught up in our own stories.
Yeah. Well, and Lisey maybe realizes she can be her own person too, you know? Maybe that's
that's the nickname, right? Plug.
Yeah, Plug.
Yeah.
Plug.
Yeah.
A little bit weird, but
yeah.
But again, I appreciate that little like she just is like, oh, these people aren't just here in my world. Like they have these worlds that they exist in on their own.
Yeah.
And that's some of the King's best flexes is when he's able to kind of go off on those little tangents, you know, and give us sort of those short stories that are maybe like 2 paragraphs long. You get just a little bit and you're like, oh, that's cool. You know, probably could, you know, if you scratch that itch a little bit more, you probably could, you know, come up with a short story if you wanted to, but you gave us just enough. And I like that. And that's some of my favorite parts about his writing is when he's able to do that. But.
Yeah. Speaking of Salem's Lot, you know.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because that's
seriously.
the strength there. Well, shall we talk about Jim Dooley or Zach McCool or what is his name? It's Zach McCool.
Jim Dooley.
His name,
Jim
right?
Dooley, Zach McCool. Yeah.
Which I always want to sing.
Since I'm talking, I'll talk more. It's so hard not to compare this to the miniseries since I just have it in my head. I will say, I'll try not to do that, but I'll say that he almost is a caricature. Like he comes real close to being 2-dimensional. I'd say he's like 2.5 dimensions. Yeah. Like he's like a thick piece of cardboard rather than like just like a stand-up character, you know? And we've talked, I know this comes up on other podcasts, is King's, when he makes his villains complicated, like that's really cool. And he can do that. And then he sometimes has someone who's just the bad guy.
Yeah.
Just bad guy, just some off his rocker, as you might say, as they say.
Yeah.
No, I think you're right. I think that the ability of being able to stay with Jim in the series, the miniseries, is where like I feel like King is able to edit himself too. To your point, like where he's able to kind of give more, you know, chapters to his persona, and you certainly see it. You know, I'm not going to spoil anything with the miniseries, but you know, you spend more time with him, and I think that when you're able to get some more of his mannerisms and kind of get some of his conceit a little bit, like I think that's important and kind of gets into like more of like the Ace Merrill, Henry Bowers of him that you don't see here. Like he's just so cute in like the way he says shit, like, oh, you know, like the Southern draw, or like, you know, like the you know, he's friendly but he's not, because obviously he's a sociopath psycho, like, you know, he's insane. And so I think like it is very surface level in the book, whereas in the show you get certainly more depth. And I think a lot of it, do we think it's because we don't get to spend alone time, you know, the solo time with him?
Yeah.
Like, you know, but I think you still could have done a little bit more to give him that depth, I guess, because he does feel like a chess piece.
Yeah, and I wonder. Go ahead.
No, I was say I've literally written down like he's a standard like cookie cutter villain, kind of just like a bad guy. I do like him actually more in the TV series. Obviously, even just his tone of voice and the way he speaks is quite terrifying. Where I don't ever really feel that scared of him in the book. Like obviously he is scary, you know, threatening Lisey and stuff, but I feel like it's just so much better done in the adaptation.
I agree. I'm liking him a lot more, and because I feel like I understand more of his motivations. You know,
since you took the lid off for talking about the miniseries, I will say some improvements and some disimprovements. Which I would. The big one for me is like he's so creepy. It's hard to believe that the professor would sit down and have a beer with him.
Yeah,
and didn't know that he was crazy.
And didn't know that he was crazy.
Yeah.
Whereas
that was my big gripe.
Whereas I believe that there are people who suffer from mental illnesses who can turn on the charm and appear quite together, you know? I also really was disappointed that King never references Strangers on a Train. Like, because it's the plot. Like, that's the plot of Strangers on Train, right? It's like the psychopath is like, oh, you want your wife dead? Okay, all right, cool. You know?
Yeah, I feel like in the miniseries, he's just more developed. Like, there's more motivation. And I wonder, like, I read him
he's
here.
Sure creepier, that's for sure.
Oh, 100%.
He is. Well, but I think, like, as I'm thinking about why that is, one, I think he's had 15 years and some editing time.
Right.
But also, I think, like, I wonder if this is one of the villains that scares him the most, because this is what he is afraid of happening to Tabitha if we're reading this as autobiographical. And I wonder, because he's one of the few villains where we don't really get any kind of glimpse into his internal life, you know, like even some of the weaker villains, like I'm thinking of Mr. Mercedes, like we still kind of get backstory there. And I'm not necessarily saying I want more of that with Zach McCool, but what I found, like the nuances of his character ring more true in the miniseries than they do in the book. And I'm specifically thinking about the can opener scene, which I read that scene and I mentally said, fuck you, book. And I just turned off. And I think part of it is because it comes out of nowhere, you know? I feel like they're building to that in the miniseries. So it makes more sense because it's not just violence. It's
sexualized violence.
Sexualized violence. Yes. Thank you. Like he is not just hurting her. He's destroying her identity and what he understands to be like holding, like it's just like he's basically an incel, you know?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, he gets the whole like stay
a lot
single.
of King characters are looking back incels. A lot of King villains.
Yeah. Stealth incels in a lot
Harold
of ways.
Lauder.
I agree. Yep. OI original incel. I agree that that's the weakness of the can opener scene, which also I had to speed read. Like I was just like, oh, okay, yeah, all right, yeah, not gonna do too much because I'm a visual reader. It comes out of nowhere. He's creepiest when he's off stage, kind of when she's thinking about him, like he could be. Like actually, there's the jump scare. There's a book jump scare where she thinks she sees him hiding behind the barn, and I almost got mad at myself. Like this is such a cheap thing, but it worked.
It does.
It worked. It totally worked.
I thought that was gonna be a hot take. I was gonna say I thought the vacuum cleaner and the fire or the lawnmower were scarier than Jim Dooley.
Yeah, no, they were. When she's that's why you don't show the monster right away at the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
When she's imagining what he'll do to her, when he says that really creepy phrase that I am not going to repeat because it made me cross my legs. You know, when she's imagining what he might do, like he's much scarier.
Yes, and the part that I pulled about that was right after he says that really creepy phrase, because I think it kind of explains why that is so upsetting to me. So he's just said that thing. Lisey had closed her eyes at some point during his lengthy speech, which had the feel of memorized set piece. She could feel hot tears trickling down her cheeks and didn't know if they were tears of rage or shame. Could they actually be tears of shame? Yes, there was something shameful in being talked to like this by a stranger. It was like being in a new school and getting scolded by the teacher on your first day. And I think that is the difference between just cutting someone on the arm. You know, like he is intending to make her feel like shit because she's a woman, and that's why. And that's like I feel like really the baseline for his hatred of her is that she exists as a woman adjacent to a man that he loves, you know?
Yeah. And I feel like it's the seed for what King is able to sprout for the show, because he definitely explores that topic far more on screen than he does in the pages here in this book, I feel. And I mean, obviously, because it's like so much of it has to be explicitly said in the miniseries. But I feel like I just get more of that from DeHaan's version of Jim Dooley than I do in the actual book.
And I will say the other thing that when adaptations soar above their source material, it's often because of the strength of the acting too, right? Because I guess I don't know that actor's name, but who plays Zach McCool. I guess he doesn't go by
Dane DeHaan.
Yeah. Like we don't need a lot of backstory. He's so good that we can. That's what acting is, right? It's like it gives us the imaginary backstory that we can fill in because we think we know this person because it's such a fully developed like presentation of that person, right? And yeah, he just oozes violence. It's so like. Yeah, he's
but like repressed violence,
like
about
that scene
to explode
at their old house. Like I was for sure he's gonna kill that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Me
he
too.
is gonna for sure kill the guy that's living in Scott Landon's old house. He doesn't, but you feel like
Yeah.
So.
And there's like I think about Pet Sematary where he put it in a drawer because he was like, this is too scary. I can't go there. I wonder if this is too personal for him to really fully explore at this point when he's writing it. And 15 years down the road, he's got a little more perspective. Like I read the can opener scene this time. I knew it was coming. I knew what it was going to be. And I could get past it. But, I wonder if the time and distance has helped him kind of understand what that character is.
I do wonder if he's like with villains lately. Maybe it's post-accident, and maybe I need to read more from the post-accident, but I feel like he pulls his punches with the villains a little bit lately over the last 20 years, like especially in the third act. And it's something that we discussed with like If It Bleeds and also with The Outsider, not spoiling those sections, but like I feel like once he gets to that point where you're in the final act, it needs to be terrifying. I just feel like he knew what to do with his villains a little bit more in the 70s and 80s and even in the early 90s than he does like in like the aughts and like the later books. Because I feel like once he gets to that final act, he's like, all right, well, I got to give it the hero. I got to give it to the hero. Whereas like a lot of his earlier stories, some of the reasons why it stays with you and they haunts with you is because he kind of leans a little bit more into the darkness. He's like, well, it's almost like there's a cynic in him that's not there anymore. Where like, oh, sorry, go for it.
Oh, no, I was just going to agree that like in classic horror in a way also, like you're never sure if the monster's really dead.
Yeah.
Then that's how he plays it in a lot of his early books. In his more recent books, it's like, it's monster's dead, boop, gone. You can move on now because the monster is dead.
You're safe, yeah.
You're safe. And that it's interesting to tie that to the accident actually. Because if you develop, he talks in interviews about a phobia of death after the accident. You would want to maybe make things end and, have the threat just go away rather than continue to be present.
Well, so I've got a couple more characters on the list, but I feel like we've talked about a lot of them in talking about the themes. So are there any characters that we have not mentioned that we want to before we move on? Maybe I'll just open it up that way. All right. Well, let's move on. I don't have a clever transition, so we're going to go to a section we call Misery.
She died. She just slipped away.
Slipped away! Slipped away! She didn't just slip away! You did it! 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 You murdered my Misery!
Penny!
And this is Misery. Look, we all love Stephen King. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't be doing this podcast. But like one Scott Landon, he is not without flaws. So this is a section where we mention any passages or sections or insufferable, never-ending catchphrases that just didn't quite work for us in our Misery section.
Oof.
And I've got one word for mine: Sowiza.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say smucking, to be honest.
Smucking is mine, but
Yeah.
Sowiza, just the term strap-on, maybe I just can't not think of dildos.
Exactly.
Oh my God. You say strap-on, and what, I don't know. Like,
What are you strapping on?
You can
That's
say
what you're
strap
strapping
it on. Yeah.
In some ways, it's appropriate. In some ways, it's appropriate because it's a very masculine, like you're going to like gear up and go out and do some damage. But I just wish he'd chosen a different, metaphor or
I'm so glad someone said it. I was so worried.
Every time. I was actually grateful for Sowiza because it meant I was not going to have to see the word strap it on.
That's true. Because what is that
Smoking was
implying
bad too,
about
though.
strength? That like being strong is taking on masculine traits. And I think one thing that we could learn
It
through this
works.
book
It
is
actually
that-
does work as like
It does, and I don't like it. Like, it's like, no, she's strong without that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, whatever it is, a gun, a pretend phallic symbol, or a more literal phallic symbol.
Yeah,
She's
I couldn't handle it. Like, yeah, the repetition of the strap-on is it just derails a lot of the severity of the situation because of the image that you get from it, which I could also make the same argument for like Bad Gunky. Because like, look, I get, the origin of where it comes from, but there's no like way that you're going to go, all right, well, Scott, that was when you were a kid. So we're just going to call this, the trauma or, the shit, something a little bit, let's upgrade the language a little bit more. Because there's so many situations that are so dour and so terrifying. And then it's just like, and the Bad Gunky. And I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
It just kind of softens the blow a little bit. But.
And if there was one, if Bad Gunky was the only thing,
yes,
I could handle it. Or if Smuckin was the only one, I could handle it. But it's like when I said I've got one word for you, there are 8 different options of something I could have said,
Yeah.
What about you, Joanne? Do you have any misery?
Literally, I just kind of, on terminology, I hate whenever he uses the puffingly huge. I don't even know what that means.
I hate that.
I'm like, what?
I forgot about that one. Yeah.
Huge.
What is that? What? Like,
and Lisey uses it all the time, and I'm like, I don't know why you're using that. And Jesus, Mary, and Jojo the Carpenter, I was like, okay, I don't know, just write that off.
We actually didn't talk about this as a theme, but one of the other themes in kind of wrapped up with how madness and creativity are sometimes maybe the same thing is how language creates worlds, right? How in writing what you do with your words, and in all this individual, like I actually went through this time and I underlined every time he uses one of those colorful phrase. That he probably got from somewhere. Because I think in On Writing, he talks about collecting phrases that he hears. And so clearly, and he does a little etymology or whatever, or like a source. He gives some footnotes about where they come from.
Oh yes, he does. All the pop culture references.
Yeah. Well, not pop culture references. It's the colorful phrases. But some of the I have it in here. I swear to God, because I was like, oh, come on. Here it is. Author's statement. There really is the pool where this case, I, go for these things. And he does Pafko at the Walls from Underworld. No One Loves a Clown at Midnight is from Lon Chaney. Anyway, some of that was a little much. That's what I'm going to say. Yes. Is I know it's a theme, and I know he's talking about world building, and he's talking about secret languages and the way those languages create literal spaces. Some of them are not great.
That was my biggest misery. I had one tiny one that is really just kind of my own little bugaboo that I can't get past, is when on page 254, talking about Scott getting shot and her chest wound. She said Scott had gotten his chest wound. Now she had hers. I was like, nope, those are not the same thing. That did not happen for the same reasons. They are completely different things. Yes, they both happened in the same general part of your body, but those are different. And that really bugged me. So I've gotten it off my chest, actually. So that was a little misery I had. Is there anything else we want to mention before we?
Yeah, there's whenever King kind of wields in his political sphere, I get a little I'm eye rolling, and it also dates it crazy. There's on page 518 when Amanda has to do the quizzes. It's July of 1946, which makes me not quite 60. Listened. I have one child, a daughter named Intermezzo, Metzi for short. Listened. George W. Bush, sad to say. I believe the man has a God complex, at least, as dangerous as that of his stated enemies. It's just so all right, we know you're bringing that to the table, King. It's just so it's so ostentatious, and it seems a little performative sometimes. He does it up until he does it even recently and later, where I think he was even talking about maybe the housing market over there, and he was kind of doing a little mini op-ed for himself in it. It just comes off as a too tangential sometimes. And he's done it forever, but it's kind of charming in a way because it's a Kingism. But sometimes I just I'm like, oh God, come on. It's this isn't Twitter.
Totally. Yeah.
And then I feel I know that Lisey's a fun character for him, but I feel he gets a little too in love with the character, where she's one point she's literally having to stop herself from laughing at herself, her own jokes, kind of biting her tongue, doing the Zaza Gabor voice. There are little times where it gets a little too cheeky for me, and I'm just I'm all right, come on, we're not that involved with them ourselves sometimes.
I got one. There are a lot of scenes in bathrooms.
Yes. Oh well, that's Oof,
that's King. We all know he has like a weird
BM
potty
fetish.
pee
Yeah.
obsession. But
Yeah.
so many scenes happen in bathrooms. Also, we get like he says like she's peeing. Like, do we like that? I don't know. Do you need that part of the detail to like be like she's in the bathroom?
Right.
Yeah. I always joke that say like if we ever had a chance to talk to King, that is I'm gonna have to talk about BMs with him. Like it's just so intrinsic in his style that like there's something there. Like I feel like his biggest fear is not monsters, not public speaking, obviously. It's shitting his pants. Like I feel like that is his biggest fear. Like it's in every one of his books. Like
I believe it's usually in fear too, right? It's the involuntary release that must just scare the shit out of him.
Yeah.
To tone a phrase.
As they say.
Yeah.
Yes.
Even like the good Ma stuff, the folksy stuff, just I don't know, it just doesn't do it for me. It gets a little too distracting. But.
Yeah, that's it. It's distracting because it's so pervasive. It's like you could probably find one on every one, like third page, maybe even on every page. And it's just, and that's where I think I was mentioning this earlier. Like, I feel like he is so into this internal world of the novel. And it's one of the few times where I feel like, I don't know if he realizes that we're not necessarily there with him,
Yeah.
Well, what about some things that we do like in a section we call Word Processor of the Gods?
And we're gonna make a new rule. Whenever I'm in here, you hear me typing. Whether you don't hear me typing, whether the fuck you hear me doing in here, when I'm in here, that means that I am working. That means don't come in. Now, do you think you can handle that?
Yeah.
Fine. Why don't you start right now and get the fuck out of here?
So Word Processor of the Gods is where we highlight the words or passages that we did like or we did even love. Joanne, do you have anything you want to
Yeah, I have, I think, quite literally my favorite passage I've ever read in a King book, or one of them anyway. On page 97. Sometimes she'd go a whole day without thinking of him or missing him. Why not? She had quite a full life, and really, he'd often been hard to deal with and hard to live with. A project the Yankee old-timers like her very own dad might have said. And then sometimes a day would come, a grey one or a sunny one, when she missed him so fiercely she felt empty. Not a woman at all anymore, but just a dead tree filled with cold November blow. She felt like that now, felt like hollering his name and hollering him home. And her heart turned sick with the thought of the years ahead, and she wondered what good love was if it came to this. To even 10 seconds of feeling like this.
Yeah, I loved that passage. I marked that one as well.
I have it marked as well.
Yeah. It's Does anyone else have anything they want to share? 'Cause I got a couple.
You go ahead. I always very stupidly never mark mine. So.
Well, the one actually I found two that are like this, and it's what I love is that we have different versions of her grief. Like, yes, there's that beautiful passage, and then there's like the one that I found is on page 212. It's a little long, but I love it. I'll read it fast. Lisey breaks. As she bolts forward into the stupid smucking memory nook, she seems to hear him say, "So he's and I'll skip about a line. And then that is gone, and she begins tearing his plaques and pictures and frame citations from the walls. She picks up the bust of Lovecraft the World Fantasy Award judges gave him for Empty Devils, that hateful book, and throws it at the length of the study, screaming, "Fuck you, Scott, fuck you." It's one of the few times she's used the word in its unvarnished form since the night he put his hand through the greenhouse glass, the night of the blood pool. She was angry with him then, but never in her life has she been so angry with him as she is now. As if he were here, she might kill him all over again. She's on a full-bore rampage, tearing all that useless vanity crap off the walls until they are bare. Few of the things she throws down break on the floor because of the deep pile carpet. Lucky for her, she'll think later on that when sanity returns. As she whirls around and around, a tornado now for sure, she screams his name again and again, screams Scott and Scott and Scott, crying for grief, crying for loss, crying for rage, crying for him to explain how he could leave her so, crying for him to come back, oh, to come back. Never mind everything the same. Nothing is the same without without him. She hates him. She misses him. There's a hole in her, a wind even colder than the one that blew all the way down from Yellowknife now blows through her. The world is so empty and so loveless when there's no one in it to holler your name and holler you home, which like almost makes me cry to read it.
I had that bit too.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are, I was just going to say, like, mine are actually more, they're not like beautiful writing. They're just like saying something so well that I've felt, you know? And Michael, this might be one that would resonate with you. He is telling her why he loves her. I lay there beside you and the tears rolled down the sides of my face and onto the pillow. I loved you then and I love you now and I've loved you every second in between. I don't care if you understand me. Understanding is vastly overrated, but nobody ever gets enough safety. I've never forgotten how safe I felt with that thing gone out of the darkness.
Yeah. I have that one.
You know what? Yeah. And then the corollary to that one, and also I have the one that Joanna read, and there's a corollary. It's for you, he says, as she yanks off her blouse and drapes it around the red and dripping mass, feeling it soak through the cloth at once, feeling the crazy heat of it, and knowing, of course, why that small voice was in such terror of the things that she was saying to him, what she knew all along. Not only is this man in love with her, he's half in love with death and more ready to agree with every mean and hurtful thing anyone has ever said to him.
Oh, yeah.
I should have read them in opposite order.
It's fun because it's funny that you mentioned like the things that like the mantras, if you will, because that's, I mean, Jen, you had it in your notes that you separated between like mantras and others. And that's how I've always done it with like the word processor. It's like things that I always joke saying like things I would have as my AOL instant messenger going away message or something like that, you know, like, and there's one I really like that was on page 18. It's like time apparently did nothing but blunt grief's sharpest edge so that it hacked rather than sliced. I like that one. I kind of wanted to ask everyone what they thought about the everything the same, like what you gleaned from that.
That was one of the ones that I wanted to talk about because that's maybe my favorite sentence of the whole book.
Like that's a tattoo.
I loved it. It is, yes. And when I think about what that means to me, I think about my time living with my first husband. And I have a distinct memory of driving home from school one day when I was teaching and thinking and being really sad and thinking, I'm going to be alone when I get home. Like there's nobody there. And feeling really sad about that, but then feeling like this relief of, well, at least I know what it's going to be, because a lot of what that is never knowing what's going to happen. Like, what are you going to come home to? And I think like of Scott living with his father, who was so like erratic and he just never knew. And I think everything the same is saying to Lisey, like, you are my safety. And with you, I feel safe.
Yeah. That's kind of how I took it.
That's the one mantra that doesn't.
Exactly. That's the one that I love. Yeah.
You could have gotten written, Soiza could have gotten rid of smucking. Come on. Like, it just sounds silly. It just sounds silly.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Randall was saying to me, we were going to get a drink the other day, and like he was just like, yeah, you know what, the language still bothers me. I mean, like, literally, like Scott's on the deathbed and she's saying smucking to him. Like what? Like, come on.
Yeah.
it's a little much. I will say, and this is going to sound cliche for all constant listeners from me, but I love when obviously King talks about the weather and the surroundings and the settings. And, you know, he is a scholar of Bradbury. And I feel like he kind of flexes that muscle big time here on page 343. When he said, so Gary assures her that the Landons have got the tightest house in Castleview. Tells her that he'll keep a close eye on Lisey's kinfolk, especially on Amanda. It almost goes without saying. And it reminds her that cold weather is just a part of living in Maine. A few 3-dog nights and we'll be on the way to spring, he says. But when the sub-zero cold and screaming winds finally roll in on the 5th of January, it's worse than anything Lisey can remember, even casting her mind back to childhood, when every thunderbuster she rode out gleefully as a child seemed magnified into a great tempest, and every snow flurry was a blizzard. She keeps all the thermostats in the house turned up to 75, and the new furnace runs constantly. But between the 6th and the 9th, the temperature inside never rises above 62. The wind doesn't just hoot around the eaves. It screams like a woman being gutted an inch at a time by a madman, one with a dull knife. The snow left on the ground by January thaw is lifted by those 40-mile-an-hour winds. The gusts kick up to 65, high enough to knock down half a dozen radio towers in central Maine and New Hampshire, and blown across the field like dancing ghosts. I love that image. And when they hit the storm windows, the granular particles rattle like hail. Like, that's when you're like, okay, that guy lives there. You know, like he knows what he's talking about. And then the last thing I said, you know, I talked about this on the Green Mile, but man, like, you know, when he wants to land an ending, like I feel like he really knows how to land an ending. And I feel like the ending, like the last few graphs in this are just gorgeous. Like I really, really, really love the closing graphs here. Lisey walked to the stairs, dripping dark drops on some of the places where she'd bled. The wrap of the African slipped down to her hips and became skirt-like, exotic, even a little sexy. She turned and looked back over her shoulder at the long, empty room, which seemed a dream in the dusty shafts of late August sunlight. I love that line. She was golden and light herself and looked young again, although she didn't know it. I guess I'm done up here, she said, feeling suddenly hesitant. I'll be going. Bye. She waited for what she didn't know. There was nothing. There was a sense of something. She lifted a hand as if to wave, then dropped it again, as if embarrassed. I love that line. She smiled a little, and one tear fell down her cheek, unnoticed. I love you, honey. Everything the same. Lisey went down the stairs. For a moment, her shadow stayed, and then it was gone too. The room sighed. Then it was silent. Like those last two sentences, the room sighed, then it was silent. It's just, that's like Hemingway right there. Like that's like the Hemingway style of just like, the less said, the better. The less said, the more. And I just love the imagery there.
Gives me chills.
Just nails it. So really gorgeous prose. Like when you know, really imaginative, gorgeous prose. I feel like when he wants to be on here.
Mm-hmm.
Can I add something? I feel bad adding because you read from the ending.
Oh yeah.
No, go ahead. I've got another one.
This is really short, but also sometimes that's where beauty comes through, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's just talking about getting the chain to lock up his brother or to restrain his brother. And perfectly huge is in the beginning. I know, so I'm not going to say that, but he's putting the tractor chain in the wheelbarrow, and he says the chain was talking all the while in its clanky language, which is all steel vowels.
Steel vowels. Yeah.
I don't know. I just like that. I just think that's really cool. And also it's cool because the chain is O's.
Oh, you know? I didn't even think about that. Yeah. I love that.
I was like, oh yeah, that's good. That's like that little phrase is great.
There's a lot of really gorgeous writing in this book, as much as there is like phrases that really bug me. That's just, some of it is beautiful.
Yeah.
I loved You Saw Me Whole. That's something, because what I add to that is, and not broken, you know, like she sees him as a whole person worth loving through all of his flaws. I've got one more that I kind of see as maybe the summary of how I feel about this. And it's Lisey again talking about her grief on page 332. Hush and close your eyes. That was her voice, but it was almost his. A very good imitation. So Lisey closed her eyes and felt the first warm tears, almost comforting, slip out through the screen of lashes. There was a lot they didn't tell you about death, she had discovered, and one of the biggies was how long it took the ones you loved most to die in your heart. It's a secret, Lisey thought, and it should be, because who would ever want to get close to another person if they knew how hard the letting go part was? In your heart, they only die a little at a time, don't they? Like a plant when you go away on a trip. Which like almost makes me cry when I start thinking about it. Because I think about it's like that's death, but that's also getting close to people, and that's intimacy, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, I have another one actually that's related to the love. It's the scene at the when he gets shot, but right before, when he does the cool like speech and like whips the apparently spins the shovel like a baton.
Uh-huh.
And she says she's been married to him. I don't think that's very cool, but apparently it looks very impressive. And she says she's been married to him since 1979 and had no idea he had such a sublimely cool move in his repertoire. How many years does it take, she'll wonder 2 nights later, lying in bed alone in her substandard motel room and listening to dogs bark beneath the hot orange moon, before the simple, stupid weight of accumulating days finally sucks all the wow out of a marriage. How lucky do you have to be for your love to outrace time?
Oof, that's a great fucking line.
Yeah.
That heavy weight of the days sucking the wow out of a marriage.
Yeah.
Since we're all veterans of marriages ending,
Yeah.
that's definitely a good way to describe it. You know,
I would say so. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I don't know, Joanne, I should not speak for you, but
no.
the rest of us have shared.
No.
about
It's,
such things. It's the Losers Club. That's what we call it.
Yeah, that's you still got it, King.
Yeah,
that's right.
You know,
well, is there
hungry.
anything else? Yeah, I'm hungry too. I was going to say, speaking of sucking the wow out of things.
I might sit this one out because it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some bad gunky in this section. Let me just say, bad gunky, not pound cake.
Bad gunky pound cake. Yeah, right. So it's coming up.
Bad gunky pound cake. Yeah.
After all you've been taught, everyone isn't bad, Mama. Everything isn't a sin.
Come to your closet and pray. Ask to be forgiven.
He's a nice boy, Mom. You like him. You really like him, Mama.
So, welcome to Pound Cake. This is the writing that we loved when we were 12, maybe. Potty humor, sexy times, salad play. What did we find in this?
Well, there was literal pound cake on page 63.
Oh, yeah?
But they were both too full to consider it.
I like to think that right. I like to think that after listening to his favorite podcast talk about pound cake, now any subsequent books they will eat the pound cake. You know,
yeah.
Well, they do in 11/22/63, I believe, right? Or no, they did. They just call the sex pound cake. It's been a while since I've read that one, but
I know the ice cream melts, but I think the pound cake survives for later.
Okay, that's good.
You know?
I do. I mean, I gotta say, I like pound cake regardless, but you know,
I've kind of
good
out of the box pound cake, which is something I don't think I've heard y'all talk about, which is the description of Hamburger Helper.
Yes.
Like he calls it eating nasty. I do kind of like the phrase eating nasty, but on the other hand, it's gross.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. But I do understand that the urge for comfort food is there, but like, it's just like, he gets a little into like describing it and, you know, just, yeah. Anyway, I think that counts as pound cake, and someone else is going to have to do the real bad pound cake from Germany.
The German
pound cake.
Yeah.
I mean, I got it pulled up unless anybody wants
Go for it.
All right.
All right. Which is funny because there's a moment that I actually like that I have as a King connection. Okay, so on page 206.
All right.
Their marriage had almost broken in that bed. Never mind how nasty fine the sex had been, or that he'd fucked her to effortless multiple orgasms, and tossed her salad.
Effortless for whom? That's
exactly. And tossed her salad until she thought she might go out of her mind from the nerve-popping pleasure of it. Never mind the place she'd found and the one she could touch before he came. And sometimes he'd just shudder, but sometimes he'd scream. And that made her go goosebumps all over, even when he was deep inside her and as hot as a suck oven. I feel like I have to retire after that.
Which I guess the suck oven is from Stephen Dobbins, according to the author's statement.
Don't put it in a sex scene. My God, don't talk about it when you're talking about like penis, vagina, sex either. Like, that's not pleasant. It's not a good way of describing it. And also, it's just like, that's the worst pound cake he's ever made, I think. Like, that paragraph might be just...
Yeah.
Because also, he probably feels really pleased with it. It sort of has the feel of like, yeah, I'm describing some hot sex here. And I'm even going a little edgy. Going edgy with the sex. Like, you know, he and Tabby read some books and like... discovered some new tricks he wants to share.
I wonder what Tabby thought when she read this.
Yeah.
It's like, why did you have to write about Thursday night? No.
Yeah. Well, no, that's actually kind of like I don't know why. It's like imagining like he really is excited about this. Like cool, new, fun stuff. But it's just please don't.
Right.
Because I mean, where he cut his teeth is obviously in Smut magazines and stuff. So I got it in that point when, you know, back when they were published in those, you know, in the mags and stuff. But like when you're doing like, it doesn't really fit here at all. Like, you know, and not to say that it ever really did fit in those, because I think that actually, because he writes a good sex scene. I mean, I talked about, you know, I'm gonna sound like I'm beating a dead horse again, but I still like the bathtub hand job in Pet Sematary, because I think it's actually written really well, and it's not too smutty. There's a fine line there, but yeah, like getting too literal about what's going on, like what's the point? You know, like why you don't really need to do that. It doesn't I don't know what you glean from it really, like other than just for sensational sake. I don't know.
Know some cool words, you know.
Yeah.
Also, effortless multiple orgasms, I think, is like a red flag.
Yeah. And I mean, again, there's nothing wrong with doing any of these things.
No,
It's just,
no.
like, lumping them all together in one sentence for me to read aloud.
And also, like hard to believe that from a missionary style sex, you would get there. That's all I'm saying. You would get to the effortless multiple. Like,
yeah. Joanne, did you have anything?
Just the part where basically Lisey was reflecting on the different terminology that Scott has come up with for sex. So it was just a list of getting his end wet, getting your ashes hauled, dipping your wick, making the beast with two backs, chugling, which I don't know what that is, and the very elegant ripping off a piece. I've never heard of chugling before, but that's a new one to add to my vocabulary, I guess.
Does he credit Shakespeare for Beast with Two Backs?
Is that where it's from?
Yeah.
Really? Would it be funny if it was in his author's statement? And this
that's what I know.
I got from Shakespeare.
No, he does credit Empty Devils with Shakespeare and things. So
Mayhaps.
I have a couple. Madame Cruella's golden showers. The obsession with Lisey's wedgie in Nashville is odd.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Mentioning it once is one thing, because I mean, look, we've all been there, and it sucks, and it's the worst thing ever, especially if people are staring at you. But
yeah,
I noted it's on page 43, page 45, page 51, and page 59. That is 4 different references to the fact that she's got her underwear up her crack. And then his bowel movements while touring. Like you're saying on it, like that is certainly a fear of his.
I will say, actually, on that particular point, when people talk about that, I've seen images. It is something that it is a thing that when you travel a lot, like you kind of have to learn, as a woman, and I didn't feel bad about describing the hover.
Okay.
Let's say that way. Because I feel like that is if you as a woman are forced to be traveling a lot, sometimes in, let's say, substandard areas, that's what you do, know?
Yeah.
So I can see it kind of being a memory for her.
Yeah.
Of that time. I'm actually, I can't believe I'm defending it, but
you're defending that's good. No, that's
but this one particular thing, he doesn't have to go further than that. You could just say hovering and then be like, that's it. Yeah, we know what you mean. We know what she's doing while she's hovering. Okay. It's not, yeah. So he always just goes there. Always.
Yeah. It's always, go for it. Sorry.
I was going to say, related, I had the arc of turds.
Yeah.
When, with Paul. I was like, I don't need that detail. And I don't need you to keep talking about it.
And also,
3 times.
So many other ways to describe the arc of what his reach was, right?
Yeah.
You could have he wore a footpath at the end of where he, the arc of a footpath around the, marked the edge of where he could get to from the chain. I don't know, something. I can't do it on the fly, but that doesn't have to be it, does it?
Yeah. Well, the last one that I had was page 103. Then off to bed, just 2 debusher old maids without a single dildo between them.
Yeah.
It's a good wrap up.
Maybe that's time to strap it on, right?
Oh.
God damn. Stop.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked about what we believe might scare King, which is pooping your pants. So let's talk about some of the things in the book that scared us in a section we call the cemetery.
What's the bottom of the truth?
Well, sometimes that is better. The person you put up there ain't the person that comes back. It may look like that person, but it ain't that person. Because whatever lives in the ground beyond that cemetery ain't human at all.
This is where we talk about what in the novel scared us. And does anyone have anything they want to share? I've already talked about the can opener scene, so I don't want to talk about that, or I'm not going to mention that again. But that was a big one.
The colorful phrase that we shan't repeat that he threatens her with. That like I said, crossed my legs. And then we also mentioned, but I'll just repeat again, the 2 fake outs that are
Mhm.
actually pretty scary.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really unnerving, and the way that he is able to kind of tease it out is just classic King. It felt like he was kind of leaning back on his older tendencies, but
I have one from basically whenever Scott's dad is kind of letting out the bad gunky. There's just a bit. Now his face looms over Paul's shoulder, and his fluff of whitening hair stands up as if all the electricity he works with has gotten inside of him, and his crooked teeth show in a Halloween grin, and his eyes are empty because Daddy is gone. He's a goner. There's nothing in his shoes but the bad gunky. He's no longer a man or a daddy, but just a blood pool with eyes. And I think that's just terrifying, that both with his dad and then with Paul, that the person that you know and love is just not really there anymore, and they've been overtaken by, mental illness or this demon or whatever it is. It's just, there's so many descriptions I had, just as both the dad and Paul. Whenever he comes downstairs and Paul is sitting at the table doing his homework or something, and it's like Paul was lying in wait. It isn't blankness he sees in his brother's eyes when Paul comes surging out of his chair hard enough to knock it skittering back against the wall, but pure bad gunky. Those eyes are blue no more. Something has burst in the brain behind them and filled them with blood. Scarlet seeds stand in the corners. And I just think that's terrifying to imagine that your family members have just turned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's
and it's
pretty good metaphor for mental illness in some ways. Like, again, to talk about people who are in the grip of, they are not the ones doing the harm to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we mentioned The Shining earlier. Like, there's the moment at the end where he talks about the mask, like the father face wearing mask. I can't remember how he phrases it, but it's similar in that way. It's like there's still a person, but the mental illness has taken over, and you can't see that person anymore.
Yeah,
I think another thing that really is effective about those chapters that King's really good at doing is the table setting of it all, and then also just the sort of claustrophobic atmosphere of it all. I think about the later on, the way that he talks about like how he had to live with Paul for a few weeks, and even when his father would go off to work. Everyone always talks about like, when you talk about The Exorcist, right? And they're like, oh, the head turning is scary and the vomiting is scary, but like, what really unnerves me about The Exorcist is the fact that like the mother has to live in that house with knowing that there's evil in the next room. And I think that like those chapters when you get like with Paul and even the father, what really struck me and gave me anxiety is just the fact of the living conditions and just like knowing that you have really no one to turn to, and that inescapable fear of knowing you're in hell and just having to find comforts within, And so like, especially towards the end when like his dad finally turns and he describes the whole like area and, like the couches had been like covered in food and spilled all this stuff. And so he had to, use the blanket to cover it. And, there was that damp smell that was coming from the drink that he got from work and every plate smashed and all this other stuff. Like, it is a literal hell that he describes. And I don't know, it really hit hard for me, especially, growing up with a parent that just that sometimes can let things fall in disarray. It sticks with you. Like even now, like I can't even, when 5 o'clock rolls around or 6 o'clock rolls around, the lights are off in the house. Like I have to put the lights on just because I don't like, I just get reminded of like that the negligence or well, it's not home. It's this hell. And those chapters just really struck me in a real way. And I felt like, and I kind of wonder like how much of that was King drawing on his own personal experiences growing up and being in a situation where like the living situation just really fucking sucked. And that's sometimes even scarier than the actual monsters that are within. Anyway, that's a long way to say just that line. Sorry.
I actually just want to validate that as someone with some sort of similar tendencies. I want to be careful about using OCD or whatever. But I am a person who can't like deal with things that aren't like at right angles and stuff. Like if some things are in front of me, like you could look at my desk right now, like everything is like, thing behind me. Everything has to be a certain way for me. Or else like I experience kind of physical discomfort. I've heard it described like visual noise. Like I can't deal with visual noise. Also, I have a thing about lights too, but mine is that I hate overhead lights.
Yeah.
And they like I don't know. Yeah. And I had not realized like how much those scenes bothered me until you mentioned it, because it is true for me. Like hoarding situations for me are like really triggering.
Oof, yeah.
And just that kind of chaos is a chaos that like I won't watch. I won't. And also to me, also it recalls a using situation. Let's just, like when someone lets things go that way.
Yeah.
It's like a sign things are bad.
Yeah.
Bad things are going to happen.
Yeah.
Or are happening. And sometimes I wonder, actually work this out. Sometimes I wonder if there's something wrong, like privileged with me about that, or that I'm judging it when things are messy like that. I don't know. Like it does make me feel like extremely uncomfortable.
Because I think a lot of it comes from the fact that it's a physical manifestation of the demons that you can kind of that you've been couching away. Like when I think about it, that's the kind of conclusion I lead to, is that like, oh great, the things that I know exist like are now literally in front of me. And I can't escape it. It's just my living situation. And that's when I knew, growing up, when we would have to go, to the other parents' house, it's just be like, all right, time to go. Things are getting a little too out of hand. We can't put it in the closet anymore. We really got to kind of put things back, and we can't do it. She's got to do it. And so yeah, that's kind of what if it's like a point of no return. If that's a good way to put a button on it for me.
Yeah, I feel like for me, it's an emotional trigger, because those scenes of mess and all of the poo, like that does, like, I have a visceral reaction to that from, I think, probably one specific memory from my childhood, but other, like, the connection I have to it is I have been trained to expect a scary reaction to that. Like, if this mess is around me, it's my fault and I'm going to be punished for it. So I've got to fix it, Yeah. But it's funny how, like, I feel like this book really kind of pulls you down into that really feeling place. And so all of these things like really come up for me. The one that I had, I had three, but they're all really about the same thing. Anytime Amanda is talking about her cuts, or Scott talking about her cuts, I have a big scar phobia. Like it really grosses me out, and I have a visceral reaction to the point where I've had a scar get infected because I was too afraid to clean it, And I think a lot of that kind of relates to kind of like what I talked about earlier. Like, a scar is a physical marker of pain. And I don't feel like it's safe for me to show that pain a lot of times, or I'm like have been trained to think that. So like I read the part about the wet and gleaming cuts that open like fish gills, and I think, oh, that is not what it's supposed to be. That's not what your body is supposed to look like. And and thinking about like them not dressing Amanda's cuts like on her hands. I'm not going to read this section because it might make me like sick to my stomach, but like she cuts these cuts across her hands, and they don't stitch them up. They don't dress them. They just leave them open. So they're this wound to show everyone what she has been through and what she's suffered. And that just makes me so uncomfortable when I read that,
Yeah. I mean, what King is really getting at too, that on the other side of things, when we talked about, the mortality fears, right? Fears of mortality. I kind of hinted at this a little bit. I actually sound like a complete moron on the recap episode for the Apple TV one, because I didn't realize that at the time. I was like, yeah, it's maybe this is like the afterlife, and and not realizing, well, it's the pool, and because you didn't finish the book yet, Mike. But anyway, the scenes at the pool really scared me, because and I talked about this on the recap up, is that they remind me of like what dreams may come in like the afterlife. And for me, I'm actually terrified of there being an afterlife. Like, I don't like the concept of hell, like really is just, it's almost so much to bear that I just kind of like hope that there's just nothing. Like, I just want them just to be an absolute nothing. And because the idea of being in any of these type of situations is just so unnerving to me. And so like these scenes that King describes at the pool with like the stairs and, the people that are covered in like the shrouded ones, and the rules that he's able to kind of hint at. and not exactly specify, but just hint at the little allusions there really have stuck with me. And I found myself just like wanting to get it the fuck out of there as soon as possible. And the concept of just being like in that sheet and just consistently staring and staring and staring. It reminded me of when we had to read like Dante's Inferno in Catholic school, and I just had like just the worst dreams for like 4 or 5 months, because like it's just you just think about the situational horror of all that. And that stuff got me. And then also in the fact that like if you left that area, then you have to deal with those like hyenas that like in the way that King describes it, how they stand up to look around. That creeped me out. Creeped me the fuck out.
And the laughter as well, and the I think is quite chilling.
But I mean, speaking of afterlives or non-afterlives, I think the idea of the eternal hell of the long boy is pretty fucking creepy.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah.
To always forever be screaming. And also like I sometimes actually for horror writers, sometimes I think, again, this is why you keep the monster behind the door for as long as you can. Like I sometimes think that King kind of falls off a little bit when he's describing the actual confrontation with the monster and how scary that is. Like the fear of that. I mean, I think actually Salem's Lot's a good example of when he does it well. But it can feel like a little bit of like underwhelming. Like you built up all this fears and then you finally see the monster. And then how do you describe a fear that's greater even than the fear you were experiencing before you saw the monster, right?
Yeah.
Zach stopping screaming and his arms coming down when he sees the long boy. I was like, oh yeah, okay. For some reason that was like, I got to where he, I think tries to get people when you see the monster, which is that it's even scarier than what you thought, which is pretty fucking scary.
Yeah.
It reminded me, like, he mentions the jaunt in this, but it kind of reminded me of the jaunt in the sense that you don't really ever get to see what it is. He just kind of gives examples of what that could be. And I always just think of in that short story about like the woman whose husband threw in there, and she's just circulating around through that infinite hell forever. But you don't really know what that means. You just conceptually think about it and you know that example. And I feel like when he does that, that's when he's at his best and most horrifying. You just let the imagination take over, Yeah. It's just, ugh.
He talks about this in Dance Macabre, actually.
Yeah.
I think specifically he talks about the monster behind the door. I think that's where I got that.
Oof. Yeah.
Well, speaking of King's Dominion and another novel where he writes things, shall we travel to, if we all think really, really hard at the same time, we can make our way to King's Dominion or room 237. First section we call King's Dominion.
There's another world out there.
I know there is.
This is where we talk about things that we found in the novel that connect to other things in the vast world of King. And I feel like this is one where it's almost like I don't want to say bull hunt, but I'm going to say bull hunt of like different pieces.
No, I think
of
actually
his
he
life.
would probably say it. He would probably say that it is.
Yeah.
If you asked him.
Yeah. And if you read On Writing, one of the things that I loved about reading that is in the first section, he's just telling all these stories of his life. And I'm like, oh, that's like that story. Oh, that's like grandma. And it's like you see where all of these things come from, even if they're not literal stories. Like he refers to his mom as a sharecropper in On Writing, and that's something that he writes in Grandma. And it's just like, I see where this is coming from. Like I see the pool that you are drawing from, which I think is really interesting. Like there, he writes in On Writing about his brother who, would like print his stories or his essays in the basement, like the printing press. Like that is something that is autobiographical, which I think is really sweet.
There is a lot in here, and that's something that I really loved about this literal King's Dominion. And that, like, I kind of noted all of them. So like these are just things that I felt like he was actually bringing to the table that are his own personal life. Some of them I roll, whatever. I'm just going to go with it. I'm going to list real fast. So he mentions the push pelt and says that that's like one of those names designed by English majors to be charming and mean absolutely nothing. That is absolutely him just taking that from his own either teaching or being a student and just rolling his eyes and being like, and that's sticking in his craw forever. He mentions Prel and Foamy. I wonder if those are products that he actually uses himself. he lists all these authors throughout the whole book, especially on page 73, of like authors that Scott reads, which I assume are authors that King reads as well. The recurring use of hamburger helper is interesting because there's actually a really famous, just a fun little cheeky King anecdote where I guess they asked him like for a recipe. And one of the recipes is just this like slop that he makes. That's like, just like he says when he was poor, he would make it. It was just like hamburger meat with some noodles and just like a like basically just ragu. And so it's a funny piece because it's like you're expecting this like actual recipe, but it's just like the most bare bones things. And I felt like he was kind of leaning on that with the hamburger helper. Pat's Cafe, where they talked about how Lisey worked there, and with the bell. That is a real hangout of King's. So Pat's Pizza has been a favorite of the University of Maine students forever, and it's said that King actually was editing or writing Carrie there, and it's still there in Orono, University of Orono in Maine and stuff. So you can go there, and they actually, one of the things I found about it was, I guess someone took the wood from the tables and made pens to sell to people, which I thought was kind of cute. I thought Lisey's thoughts on werewolves were kind of shared by King, where he talks about like the movie Werewolves. I thought that he was kind of almost like leaning on the Dance Macabre stuff there. The Scott's love of, or like Lisey talking about how Scott would love satellite radio and its stations. I feel like King just, that's his own observation, especially since he owns his own radio station. The Pigwatt. So this is a weird one. And this is a stretch. So he mentions that they go by the Pigwacket campground, and I looked that up, didn't see anything, but I did find out that in Down East magazine on Kever Lake, like some 15 years ago, or at least according to the magazine, Stephen and Tabby bought the lake's only campground and shut it down, and which made it actually kind of quieter because there weren't that many people like on jet skis and boats and stuff. Apparently people loved it, but then some also locals hated it because they're like, well, that was our tourism, so what are you doing? But and then the fact that like he literally says in the book like he didn't even plan his books, and then also talks about like the handicaps for novelists, I felt like are all things that King is bringing to the table that are certainly in his own domain. So just wanted to put that in there just because it doesn't obviously involve his own stories, but I felt like we're absolutely him, that we're on there. So anyway, I digress again.
I mean, there are so many references to his own world too.
Oh yeah,
like his fictional world. I mean, it takes place in Castle Rock, so we could go through all the names of the people who live in Castle Rock who get mentioned, or the places of Castle Rock that get mentioned. But I also, as I mentioned earlier, the arguments against insanity fall through with the soft shirring sound is Jack Torrance's line, or actually, I think I saw that it's a real poem that Stephen King wrote. I don't know why I laugh at that, but he sometimes is in love with his own writing, I think. There is a turtle ashtray. I don't know if anybody noticed that. Yep. Lisey has a turtle ashtray. And then
I wrote a thing about King geography, or Kingiography, if you will. And I did mention, like we mentioned, Lisbon Falls, Castle View, the Harlow Deep Cut Road, which is going to come up in... and Dark Score Lake also, which I believe is Bag of Bones. And then I love what he says about Deputy Andy Clutterbuck. He says, after a minute or so of McGruff, a cop with the name Scott would have loved came on the line. And he's talking about Clutterbuck. And I'm like, yeah, he does love that name. Yep. The King name. And then he mentions King CMG or Kingdom when he's talking about hospitals, which would be Kingdom Hospital. And then I've got a couple more, but did
Shooter's Knob also isn't Shooter's Knob.
Shooter's Knob is that where the dude from is it what's the Secret Window?
Yeah, it's one of the alternate personality ones.
Yeah.
I found it. Well, it's true.
It's true. It is, yeah.
Okay, here's one. This again might be 237. It was as if the past had never died, as if on some level of time's great tower. Everything was all happening.
Yeah, that too. And then along that line as well, I have a world right next door to this one, and the wall between is so thin, like a thinny. And other worlds beyond the moon, it literally says on page 508. And I also have that Darla has a Michael Noonan novel on cassette tape, which is Bag of Bones.
Oh,
That's cool.
And then obviously the reference to it whenever Scott says "Hi-yo, smucking silver."
Smucking.
And then there is also a reference to the territories, which I kind of thought was the talisman, maybe. And then obviously, of course, his obligatory JFK assassination reference whenever he speaks about the photo of Oswald, whenever he's dying. So typical King again.
Oh, I didn't catch those. Good catches. I have some thematic connections. So when he talks about, she is talking about laying in the beds, like she's kind of defining her marriage by bed, which is something that Wendy does in The Shining. And there's a moment. Yeah, I think you're right about this being kind of spiritually connected to The Shining. And if I have also on page 226, he's talking about Daddy cutting Paul. If the bull's on Paul, he cuts Scott, and if the bull's on Scott, he cuts Paul, which is something we see in The Green Mile. That's how he kills the girls. Like he says, he kills them with her love by threatening to hurt the other one. This is one I found for Randall. They're talking about digging fingernails into palms, and then the night vision equipment comes up in End of Watch and some other horror properties. And then, there's one moment on page 438. It was full dark out now, and if there was a moon, it either hadn't risen or was occluded. So I think if we know that there is no moon, we can also assume that there's no stars. So full dark, no stars.
I had a similar thing where on page 437, not too far from that, he talks about it is the pool of life, the cup of imagination. She has an idea that different people see different versions of it, but with two things ever in common. It's always about a mile deep in the fairy forest, and it's always sad because imagination isn't the only thing in this place is about. It's also about giving in, waiting, just sitting and looking out over those dreamy waters and waiting. It's coming, you think. It's coming soon. I know it is. But you don't know exactly what, and so the years pass. That kind of reminds me of The Raft with the Do You Love and like the dreamy kind of whirly textures that draws people into its path. I don't know. Seems maybe that's more of a Room 237, but
we already kind of talked about just as a theme his own work, not his own work, but his life story and being a writer. But I'll just say it again, the whole like having to get a National Book Award and a Pulitzer to be considered, like that's how he signifies good writer. He does that with other fictional writers too, I think. And also he does have a vision of writers in the King universe. This is King's Dominion. In the King's Dominion, writers are like fucking rock stars.
They are.
And like people like line up to like for autographs and like scream and yell, and like even in the miniseries where they have like the bleachers are full for this library dedication, I'm like, what author? Like maybe J.K. Rowling. Like, okay, that is someone who I can imagine someone filling bleachers for. But like,
although Ryman did sell out when he came to Nashville, but nobody was like throwing undergarments on the stage.
Yeah, that's sort of like the image I feel like he has for for successful authors in the King universe have very prestigious awards, and like young women throw their bodies at them.
Yeah.
You know, like maybe, I guess, like that's a Johnny Marinville. And by the way, so I'm thinking of Johnny Marinville as the other, like has to get an award in order to prove that he's actually a good writer. He's not, King isn't just saying he's a good writer. He's actually a good writer. So,
oh, that's interesting.
There are a few other like elements that I feel like he had to have just put in there. I mean, I feel like the mention of the Polaroid cameras was kind of especially being in Castle Rock was like a reference to Sundog. There's the hypodermic needle. I felt was kind of a callback to Pet Sematary a little bit, especially that being like the way to kind of end things, which is what Lewis does. I felt even the way that Scott develops his baby talk again whenever he kind of thinks about his trauma is the same way with Bill and his stutter in It. Oh, even like the description of Empty Devils about the creature crawling out of the well. I kind of felt like that was like his It. And as we discussed in the recap episode, I guess the book cover for Empty Devils looks like It also in the miniseries. So maybe that was implied that like that's supposed to be kind of like his own version of It.
And isn't it curious that the one horror novel that Scott Landon has written is the one that the critics hate, but everybody else loves. And what does that say about how King feels about his own writing?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Totally. Totally.
I got real curious. Oh, well, okay. Very disappointed to learn that there's a killer pie. This is the miniseries thing, but I was like, would King do that? I mean, he has the killer pie in Thinner, but that's not a slapstick thing. And it's also somehow he makes it, you take it seriously, like in a weird, like he does a lot of building up. So it's not a slapstick pie, but like, don't they say it's Evil Devils that the magician kills with a killer pie?
I think so. I think that, yeah.
I was like, that's not the plot of Empty Devils that I imagined.
Yeah, no. I always thought it was just going to be more about like the shooting. Because that's could be one of the reasons why, or something that's a little more closer to their personal life. Which
yeah, that's what I assumed. I assumed it was like some sort of like taking from his childhood. And, but apparently there's killer magician pies. So
yeah,
I mean that would be scary. I think.
Oh, speaking of scary, they mentioned Happy Crappy, which is
yeah.
Talking about a scary character. There is.
They also go ahead.
Go for it. You go for it.
I was going to say Deep Space Cowboy is mentioned quite a bit, which is from Gerald's game.
And this is a stretch, but the discussion of the mental book snake felt like Jonesy's own mental library that he has in Dreamcatcher. Granted, we haven't talked about that book on here, but you know, this is written after the fact, so maybe he's still thinking about that.
Yeah. Well, I have my favorite, maybe my favorite King's Dominion ever, because it relates to one of my favorite short stories, is on page 469. Scott's study was, except for the book snake, and the stained white carpet upon which it dozed, waiting for the next thing, if there was a next thing. And in Mrs. Todd's Shortcut, which is an amazing story, they talk about waiting for the next thing and waiting for the last thing, which is death, which I think is I just loved that. I read that and I was like, oh, perfect little Easter egg for me.
Yeah.
There's also mention of the room, like he dies in room 319. Something happens on March 19th. Like there's kind of pervasive 19s.
Yeah, because Route 19 is another one. I did feel like the 319 and the fact that she's like anticipating 319 was very like so much of a callback. Yeah, to that.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Oh, there's also a Halloweenies Dominion.
That's right.
On page 257, references Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween. So how about that? You could check out our other podcast, Halloweenies.
Well, she also says at one point, "This is no dream. This is really happening," which is another famous horror movie, Rosemary's Baby.
Oh.
She says that. I was like, oh, interesting. Sounds like we're nearing the end of the yellow string, currently unraveling the beautiful Afghan that probably took a long time to make. So let's close by sharing our final thoughts, nose rankings, and MVP.
Dad, can we go now?
You ready?
Yeah, we've been ready for an hour.
Okay, I'll be right there.
You said that a half hour ago. Yeah, my dad's weird. He gets like that when he's writing.
Joanne, would you like to start?
I don't want to go first, but I will.
Oh, you know what happens? Okay.
Yeah, just because I kind of feel like nearly like a bias inside me where it is one of my like top 5 King books. Like I love this book. I've read it like 3 times in like a small amount of time. I do acknowledge that it's not perfect. It has plenty of problems. Well, plenty of smucking problems. I just have a real emotional attachment to it. I kind of, it's one of the books that I always cry on like numerous occasions whenever I read it. I think it incorporates a lot of my favorite aspects of King's writing, you know, whether that's whenever he goes really dark and disturbing and like in Scott's childhood, then obviously all the passages on grief and loss I love as well. And I also love when he creates other worlds that characters can, you know, pass into. And I do love Buyamun and the fact that it's obviously stunningly beautiful, but also the danger that lurks there. I think it just ticks a lot of boxes for me. So I feel like my ranking is higher than everyone else's. But
Mine are usually high.
Yeah, I feel like I'm lying if I don't give it 5 bright red Pennywise clown noses. So I have to go with my gut in that instance. As for an MVP, probably Amanda. Just because, as we've discussed, she's probably the most fully fleshed out character. And she's just kind of the one that has stuck with me since finishing it recently. So, and in the adaptation as well, I think she's great too, which is good to see. So yeah, that's my full 5 noser.
Yay. Well, as somebody who will never stop defending Firestarter, which also has problems, I completely understand. Yeah. Anna, what about you?
I wound up really, I liked this more than I thought I would. It is obviously, we spent a long time talking about the problems in it. And I don't know, it's fun. I guess it speaks to like why I would do a 4-hour podcast about Stephen King, that I still love it, like I'm willing to grant him so much space in my head. It's kind of, I don't know what that's about exactly, but I would give it 4 bright red Pennywise clown noses. Taking one out for the pound cake, smucking, Suiza, those to me, you get a whole nose off,
Yeah.
Without those, it might be 5 noses for me, because it does have a lot of, and also if they'd given Lisey more of a character, which speaking of, I go with Amanda too as an MVP. She's literally an MVP too. I mean, I guess it's not literal, but Lisey can't do what she needs to do without Amanda. Right. And I sort of feel like that falls off a little bit towards the end. Like we don't get enough of how heroic Amanda behaved, and like how hard that must have been, But yeah, I think Amanda is definitely up there, and Andy Clutterbuck too.
Yeah.
All right,
Mike, what about you?
It's funny because I was thinking a lot about this, because this is a tough read for me. But ultimately, this book reminds me a lot of my experiences with Vanilla Sky, which is Cameron Crowe's remake of Abre los Ojos. Because I remember at the time when that movie came out, I was so wrapped up in the twists and turns of that film that I wasn't enjoying the movie. I just was like, oh, come on. Oh, come on. Oh, come on. And I won't spoil the movie for constant listeners, but, especially those who haven't watched it yet. But ultimately, the ending, it's like a real big emotional punch, and it just knocked me the fuck out. Like I just was so much so that I remember even like going back to the theaters the next day. And then I watched it again, and I just like bawled my eyes out, and I just let myself be absorbed by the emotionality of the film. And I feel like Lisey's story is very similar. I think King takes some big swings here, narratively, metaphorically, spiritually. And I don't think all of it works, as we obviously discussed today, but the bruises you're left with, they sting. They really sting. And I think a lot of that is because, again, and not to beat a dead horse, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, as I always do in this podcast, but I think this speaks to his strengths as a dramatist. I think that, and I've always said it, I think King's greatest flex isn't tilting open the closet door and scaring us, but giving you that random call that just tears you down to tears. And like, look, like TNT, King knows drama. So, and I feel like Lisey's story speaks to that truth. I mean, this book's a lot of things, and that's probably one of its weaknesses, maybe its greatest weakness, but it's scary. I mean, it's scary, it's sappy, it's bittersweet, it's personal, it's funny, or at least it wants to be. But it's always imaginative. And more importantly, like you get the sense that it's coming from such an achingly personal place. And as someone who's always been obsessed in the context of King in his writing, I mean, obviously not Jim Dooley obsessed, but I have to respect that about this book. I think you got to respect that. And, so I think I'm going to give this 3.5 bright red Pennywise clown noses with a little box of Hamburger Helper that elevates it. Because I'm going to give Hamburger Helper the box of the MVP. Because nice. If you recall, the box unites everyone, and it provides comfort. So with the box, it'll probably bring it closer to 4. But maybe on future trips to Beyond Moon, because I'll definitely be revisiting this over the years, it'll get to 4, maybe even 5. But yeah, for right now, I'm 3.5. So sorry.
If you had asked me this on my first read, I probably would have given this a 1 or a 2. I was shocked by how much I really loved it and really enjoyed it. And I feel like like I've talked about, I think I was just in a place to connect with it better. This is the kind of book that I love because I really love connecting with emotion, and kind of helping me process and using a story to help me like kind of dig into things in my own life. And I feel like this has made me think a lot about my own marriage and just my own relationship with addiction and mental health, and just kind of, it's really kind of sent me on a Boole hunt about who I am, which I think is really goes a long way to helping me overlook some of the things that kind of grated on me the first time I read it. I think I'm going to give it a 4.5. Right, Pennywise clown noses. More just because the experience of reading it, is just. And it strikes me that I feel like a lot of like we've picked a lot of this apart, but we're all rating it still pretty high. And I think that just speaks to how much there really is here. That this is not just a story of a widow moving on. There's so much more, which is the thing that I really like to dig into. And my MVP is Lisey. I agree with what we've talked about the way she's written, but I feel like she's the one that I'm with through the story, and she's the one like I just really jump on board on her side, and I just love her. Yeah. So those are our thoughts on Lisey's story. A lot of thoughts. So we are a member of the Bloody Disgusting Podcast Network, and you can find us here and there along with other loads of fantastic pods by going to bloodydisgusting.com. And we've got a lot of exciting things coming up too. We have an episode on Lisey's story, episodes 3 and 4, which I believe is going to be available for patrons. We've got also available for patrons a Cat's Eye commentary and a crate on one of history's greatest movies, Jurassic Park.
Cannot wait to record that episode.
It's going to be just lots of roaring.
It's going to be double this, I think, probably, knowing how to
it might be,
movie.
Yeah. And we've been dropping little prompts on Patreon on Wednesdays, which have been really fun. Just like kind of the 10 and 15 minute discussions about like what member of the Losers Club would go bad. So check that out. And we've been teasing this for a long time, but I think it's finally coming soon. We have a very special episode, which I am so excited about. So make sure to check the feed for that. Joanne, where can we find you online?
You can find me on Instagram at Joba69. Basically, I just post book reviews, book recommendations, host read-alongs, often King read-alongs. And yeah, that's where you find me online. I'm not on Twitter or anything because it's toxic. Just on Instagram, yeah. I just can't. I go on to like sneak and look at people and then leave again. I don't post anything.
Yeah. Anna, where can we find you?
I am in the toxic space of Twitter. I am at Anna Marie Cox, and that's Anna with one N. I'm also on Instagram, where if you are interested in the mental health stuff, that is a place where I'm actually much more active, posting about addiction, body image. Those are sort of my big things. And I also write. Yes, I write. I have some pieces in The Atlantic and also Washington Post out. I have another podcast for genre fans called Space the Nation, where I and my friend Dan Dresner, who's an IR professor at Tufts, talk about science fiction from the point of view of people who are really interested in politics. And I always have to say, it's not like this person represents Trump and that person represents Hillary. It's kind of deeper than that. Mm-hmm. And we do actually a fair number of horror things in that as well. And then, yes, I have my main day job. I'm the host of the podcast With Friends Like These, which is a podcast about talking through tough shit and accidental harms that we do each other. So that's it.
Lots of applicable themes to that podcast in this episode.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And Mike, what's coming up for Halloweenies?
Halloweenies has been busy. We're going to be dropping I think like a 3.5 hour. Wow, that seems to be what a surprise, right? A 3.5 hour episode on The Conjuring. We are going to be doing a new Randy's Rex episode on the House on Sorority Row, which is actually recording the same time that we're doing this one. So that's why we do so many episodes. We had to do dual Zoom accounts. How about that? Which is wild. But yeah, so we have that, and then. I believe, next month we got some fun goodies and stuff, but it's busy times. It's the summer. Things are opening up again. We're going to have our offline event here in Chicago where we're going to be doing some Stephen King screenings. coming up soon for Losers Club, so that's exciting. We're going to meet a bunch of you out there, which I'm really excited for, especially Stand By Me. The idea of, I know Stand By Me takes place over Labor Day weekend, but I felt like the 4th of July alignment still works as well, so I'm excited for that one.
Yeah.
But Jen, what about you? What's going on at Psychoanalysis?
Well, you can find me at Jen Fratu on socials and on the podcast Psychoanalysis, where we talk about mental health. So if you liked this episode, you will probably like Psychoanalysis.
Yeah.
We tend to talk about a lot of these kinds of themes. We are wrapping up our month on bad dads, and in June we're going to be talking about phobias, and we haven't solidified the films yet, but there might be some slithering coming up soon. And Anna was just on a comfort horror episode on Alien. I believe that's our reigning episode right now. So make sure to check that out. We've got a lot of fun stuff coming up. And that is our episode on Lisey's story. Joanne, thank you so much for joining us. This was so much fun.
Thanks for inviting me.
And Anna and Mike, thank you. I always feel like I need to thank everyone on the pod when we have an episode where like I talk through a lot of stuff. But I'm really grateful for that this pod exists, because this is a way that I let out some of my bad gunky. And I'm grateful for listeners for being there with us. So let's sign off. We will see you over long days
and
pleasant nights.
I got some hot friends. God, I got some hot friends. I got some hot friends. God, I got some hot friends. But you know you want somebody to treat you good.
This is the end of our show. For now. We hope you enjoyed this production. If you like our programming, consider searching for other bloody disgusting podcasts, such as Creepy, Horror Queers, The Boo Crew, SCP Archives, Nightlight, Margaret's Garden, Nightmare on Film Street, and more.